roll call. Trustee McMullins.
Present.
Trustee Khan. Here. Trustee Andrews here. Trustee Patel. Here. Trustee Clark.
Here.
Right. And we're to the approval, reordering of agenda items. Does anyone have anything to change to the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve that then?
I'll move that.
Second.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And then,
You can, or you can do it all at once, or you can
Okay.
just, you know.
what we'll do, so I'm assuming there's no public comment on non-agenda items? unless
We're really
staff
lonely.
wants to get up.
Maybe we should have a call.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead actually and proceed to consent calendar. And as usual, if I can get a motion to approve the consent calendar, we'll have a moment to discuss it before a vote.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
So I just wanted to make a quick comment, sort of a overall observation about how interesting and vibrant and active all the reports were this month, and how much external engagement at lots of different levels, from sort of the most granular local to national and I guess even international, was discussed. And it was so impressive, and I really was, I was blown away.
Good, thank you.
Katie, you're absolutely correct, because there was so much here, and it was very different than some of the things that we've read. But in fact, I still say that we need to talk about a couple of things. The outreach that's been going on between the volunteers, uni, as well as public service, I thought that was quite interesting. The other thing that I guess it was that Stella talked about outreach and a couple of things that she had been involved in. Thank you for doing that. Even sharing and speaking at one of the conferences, is that right? Yeah. Christopher is just an amazing guy. When it comes to technology, I'm always blown away by Christopher. He's really quite amazing guy. So I want to just thank him for so much and for doing that. And you know, when I was teaching science, I noticed that you had an owl pellet dissection. And I said, oh, wow, I should have been there. Because we did one of those, and that's always great. And then, of course, you've got a lot of other things that's going on. Jesse Lopez, incredible, already written 2 grants. I'm just amazed at what you're doing, and not to laugh at it, but it's just that it's just an amazing work that everyone is doing here at the library, and how appreciative we are of all that you're doing. So thank you so much, and Nikki, thank you for your message before you left town and went into conference, and also your report. Thank you so very much. Really appreciate everybody.
I have a couple questions on Christopher's report. Nikki, do you think you might?
Yeah. It's just amazing.
Okay. I'm just curious about the Surface Hub thing, when it talks about collaboration and, scheduled meetings and so on. I just wondered, like what kinds of collaboration, and what kind of meetings will that facilitate? Is it like a virtual meeting? This page 13.
Him and I met 2 weeks ago, and we had a long list of projects that he has in mind. Which
The thing in the first paragraph, yeah, he talks about offering it to the public, so I'm just trying to picture what that actually will look like in the small meeting room. That's the one upstairs, right?
It's like
said that you can like, you know, it has like
Video
programs,
conferencing.
yeah, and video conferencing.
So it's almost like a smart board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what
Yeah.
it
It
is.
is a smart board.
Okay,
and
so if
the
there's a
ones
little
that we got
group around that
funded will be
table,
mobile.
the facilitator can be doodling on that and it will project, is that the idea?
I believe so.
I'm embarrassed to say that I just Googled reskinning, because he says that pretty much every month and I had no idea what that meant, so now
Yes,
I kinda get it. For those of you who don't know, I'm not sure I can repeat what I read, but it's something like
I did.
taking an existing app and the coding that goes along with it and just making it look different and, you know, kind of recycling, I guess, an old app with the code that it has. So, so now I kind of understand it, but what is the iCell unit? And
Oh.
Big kiosk that, I don't know if you remember, but in front of the door, we have this like big kiosk and it has like a fabric skin on it and it has a screen, and when you put your hand over these little squares, it will play a different like video.
where is
And
this?
we got it, we don't have it
Oh.
up right now,
Oh,
but
oh.
we got it when we did the water conservation garden through that grant. And so at the time, it was programmed to talk about like water conservation and stuff like that. And so they're gonna like repurpose it.
For library programs and
Yeah.
stuff? So
And
it's,
they just have to, yeah, they are gonna like recover it and then like reprogram all the videos
Yeah.
and things like that.
cool.
Wonderful.
We think
And-
we're gonna put it in the children's room,
Oh,
because
Oh, the kids love
the
it.
kids
Oh, yeah.
really like it a lot.
I can see
Interactive.
and then Oculus Quest, what's that?
Oculus is virtual reality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, I just want, it said that an additional public catalog is deployed. I'm just wondering where that is. An additional public catalog was deployed at the main library?
It's on the
It's-
column by our public printer.
I don't even know, I didn't even know there was.
So, if you can envision the information desk, and then to the left, if you're looking at the information desk, to the left, there's like one of the columns, and there's a copier there, and then it's just posted, it's mounted on the pillar.
So the CERT desk is here with the one that's on the CERT desk, and then that's further.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. And if I may, I just had one other question. Jonathan, what's an external ship ladder?
So that Jonathan doesn't have to go up through the fancy video.
Basically, we're putting a boat on the roof.
A book on
A
the.
boat.
A boat.
No, no.
He's being funny.
So basically, a ship ladder.
Why not?
So a ship ladder, what it does, it goes at a 60-degree angle instead of going vertical with the,
Oh.
with the wall. So it's much safer for anyone who's going on the roof. Right now, our access is going through the circulation office. There is a room where Christopher has his IT, his server farm. And so up there, to prevent any dust from coming in, to preventing any more damage or any damage to the servers, we've kind of not used that access anymore to go up to the roof to do any type of change, like temperature or something like that.
Was that the one you went up in that little video we saw of you
Yes.
when you were doing it like
Mhm.
Yes.
25 miles an hour up the?
Yes,
Okay.
And so what we're doing is we put a slab, a 9x11 slab, and now we're gonna be, first week of December, ship ladder will be delivered to us, and we're gonna install it on the outside of the west side of the building between us and the senior center. And it's gonna go up, so we have easy access to get to the roof, or any temporary repairs that we may need to do, any type of things that we need to do with our air conditioning units or whatever.
So, and that's permanently installed?
This is permanently installed.
And how do you keep other people from going up
It
it?
has a door that will be locked.
Ah,
Good, okay.
interesting.
I think that was all my
Besides the guard dogs
questions.
that we have there,
I'm sorry?
besides the guard dogs.
They're all good. Okay. Okay,
I was
thanks.
wondering that too.
Anything, Jason?
No.
Okay. Just a couple things for me. One is that I'm trying to remember the disposition of that little vital statistics matrix we had every month, where we'd have the visits and we would have the items checked out and everything. Were we revamping that basically to re-include it in the packet
Yes,
going forward?
and we had a meeting with all of the departments and people that submit statistics, and Christopher presented the new spreadsheet. So I think we're still working on how that's gonna be presented, because, you know, I think what we need to know, or what maybe we need to send out like a survey to you guys, I don't know, just to see what you guys want, unless you want the like entire sheet, you know, it's a lot of pages of statistics, and it's more reflective now of what the state requests. And so, I think Cindy's original intent was to present the state report to the board, which is included this month, and then, you know, going forward to find out what statistics you guys specifically want, or what would help you with your work. So,
Okay, yeah, I think that refining that and getting some ideas in there about what we might like to see going forward, especially since we've rejiggered a lot of things now, and we're heading into facilities, the season of the facilities committee. One of the things I wanted to do, because it was a little bit of a topic of conversation at the town hall meetings, was which library is sort of utilized more than the other, which branch is utilized more than the other. And I thought an interesting statistic, Jonathan helped me out with this, would be to get the square footage of space that we have here, and we know the square footage is at the branch library, the people where it's a common use area, and figure out how many visits per square foot we're getting, which is the sort of thing that we're gonna need when we start going down the road with facilities. And so I don't think, and we'll talk about this more when the committee comes up, that they're gonna be able to slice and dice all the material for us, if you know what I mean. So it'd be, I think that report that we had before was pretty solid with visits and library cards especially, that's a big one. But maybe, I don't know, it might even need a little meeting or something like that, a little review with a couple of people, just to figure out what's gonna be important going forward.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna agree with that. Like, I think the state library report, I appreciated seeing it. It is not user-friendly at all. And that's not a criticism, like, that's just, I don't know, looking at, the thing I appreciated about the bar charts we have previously is it allowed us to compare over time. And I think that's incredibly valuable to see how we do over the course of a year, also
Compared.
year over year. I think that was super helpful, in terms of program attendance and library card circulation. I love the square footage, like public square footage usable, and visitors like worked it out. I think that's really cool. That's a really smart idea.
Well, I haven't done it yet, because I didn't have the base, the denominator for it, but you see what I'm saying, things like that, that get a little bit more into the weeds about what's happening here would be helpful for the facilities group. And then on the state library report, which I thought was interesting too, I did not know, however, what the columns meant. If you look at page 22 going forward, there's a couple of columns, I mean, well, is that last year and this year, or?
Yes.
So which one is which? Is last year on the left and this year's on the right?
Last year's on the right.
Okay,
So the grayed out side, basically, on the left, where it's darker, is this current, fiscal year 18-19.
Got it.
And I included in my report that from talking to Christopher and some of the other staff, they weren't either accurately keeping track of some of the statistics, or we just didn't have them. So I think comparison of this year to next year, or this current year compared to fiscal year 18-19 will be a lot better comparison between the two.
okay.
And why are some things red and some things green?
On the titles, you mean? Yeah.
Fields in green are for CSL use only, fields in red are system calculated.
Oh, sorry.
Whatever that, I don't even understand that.
What does that mean? That is indeed what they are, but what the heck does that mean?
This, when the state library populates them
Yeah.
automatically.
Oh, it like auto-calculates
Yes.
some of them for you?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And some had a -1 or 0, so
Yeah, those were the ones that
We
there was
didn't.
nothing,
there
or,
was none of.
yeah.
Can I just ask, I mean, if we're gonna really dig into this for a second, I don't understand I'm looking at page 23, and under circulation, why can't you retroactively calculate circulation of children's materials? Can't you, I mean, I can in my system.
We can,
Mhm.
but we can't put it in the report.
Oh.
Yeah. Once you submit it, you can't change it.
Okay, so is the column with the previous year's numbers, was that part of the support the report that got submitted? Or was that just for our information? Do you see what I'm asking? The right-hand column that shows the previous year's statistics, is that part of what got submitted to the state?
Yeah, like this is generated by what was submitted.
Okay,
So like you click on print and this gets pulled up as a
Okay.
PDF.
okay,
So it's based on what was submitted the year before
got
and,
it, okay. That, I mean, we can know
right,
what the circulation of children's materials was for the previous year.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm sure Christopher did pull that.
And one more thought on the report agenda we talked about, and that is that one of the things I would be looking for, and that would be some kind of a total on the far right column. Because this thing in the old Excel version you used would have the months and so on, but you always have to do the math. You have to add them all up to get to what the baseline number, what the total number was. So I'm wondering, Nikki, if we can ask from you and staff for some sort of a model, some sort of a look at what these statistics will be going, will be showing us going forward. Because it would be nice to kind of adjust our schedule for the beginning of this calendar year going forward. It'd be nice to feel like we're really, in the mix with our statistics, so that, especially when we're working shoulder to shoulder with these facilities.
Okay.
Are you talking about a monthly, what is it?
Yeah, just a series of reports like we used to get, where they would
Right.
have, the visits, and they'd have the
Okay.
library cards and all the other stuff.
Okay. Because this is submitted once a year, right?
Correct.
For the
Yeah, we're talking
fiscal
about
year.
Mm.
Or for
fiscal
the
year,
Fiscal
yes.
fiscal year.
Yes, it gets released in like August and it's due by November 1st.
Mm.
So
Okay.
you work on the state report basically in October. But what we're talking about is putting together reports for you
For us.
monthly.
Right.
And I'll work with the staff to determine what we think statistics would be relevant. And then if there's other things you wanna see added, we can always, or, adjust it accordingly.
I would just say for myself, one thing I know I'm gonna be really interested in is circulation, and particularly print and digital. And DVD, I'd like a little more breakdown,
Sure.
because I think that's important in terms of the resources that we spend to know what's being used. I find that really hard in my own library to really get my arms around digital stuff in terms of who's really using it. And so that's something I'm curious about.
Now the programming is a composite of everything, is that right? Rather than what's happening over at the branch versus,
Right. And I know we keep those statistics, so we could easily include that in the report. The state report, yeah, you just literally add it all together.
yes. Mhm.
Could I just ask a terminology question?
Sure.
I've heard this building called the main branch. Isn't
The
this the
main
main
library,
library and that's
yeah.
the branch library? Is it correct to call this a main branch?
Main library.
I think the words can be interchangeable.
Do you, okay. Because to me, it's like you've got the main one and then you've got the branches.
Right.
But I don't know if that's,
I've
Just
seen them
convention
called
here,
many
or-
things. I mean, in Orlando, they were called the neighborhood libraries,
Mhm.
not the branches. Sometimes
but the main was always the main, wasn't it?
central, yeah, over there.
Central.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we should say.
Nobody's yelled at me yet.
I'm sorry, nobody's yelled at you?
me yet,
Well, I appreciate that,
We're using them
we
together.
have two buildings and we don't wanna
Confused.
diminish one to the, at the expense of the other, or whatever, anyway. But I just didn't know if that was a thing. Okay.
And again, with that subject, I'm wondering, Nicole, is now a good time, because your report's in here, to talk about some of the specifics of the budget information you've given us, or do you want to wait to hold off to that later on?
Either way.
Okay, a couple of questions from me, or a couple of observations, I guess. When you look at this report, it's July through September, that's our first fiscal quarter, basically, you wrap that up. And And when we look at this, I see that if you look at total expense, we've spent about 25% of our budget, 24.5%.
Can
Oh,
we
wait a
just
minute,
ask you, aren't we way ahead on the agenda?
Yeah, we gotta.
That's
calendar
item,
first.
that's
That's
Did I
five.
get way out of the ballpark on
Yeah.
this one? Okay, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
let's hold off into that.
Nicole's too nice to drink, it's not.
You have to bring a gong when that happens, so I know what's going on.
So we're only up to page 16.
Right.
We jumped ahead a little bit. 'cause
Okay,
we're
yeah, I
talking
did.
about
Yeah, we
stats,
did.
but we haven't really done Nikki's report yet. so.
Okay, good. I'm sorry about that.
Do you guys, are you guys ready to take a vote on the consent
Yeah,
calendar?
let's do that.
Yes.
Do we want to hear Nikki's report first?
That's not in the consent calendar, so.
Okay, okay. All right.
So any more discussion on that? Okay. And you've got the motion and the second, so I'll propose a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 That motion carries. Okay. Now, there were no items removed from the consent calendar, so we're on to reports. I'm so sorry for getting ahead of everybody. Is there anyone here tonight from the Altadena Library Foundation then?
Bridget is out of town. She said she had nothing to report.
Okay. And then right on cue,
That was not intentional.
That was impressive.
yeah, because we just came to that item. Because of the Altadena
Wish
Library.
outside listening.
So,
I usually work from home, so I've got no conflict with traffic at this time of day, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna make it.
well, if you need to catch your breath or anything, we'll give you a couple of minutes.
So, all I have to report really is, maybe I should catch my breath first. As some of you know, we had I think all of you know, we had our 60th anniversary party at the start of the month. And some of you were there, and it was really amazing. It was a great turnout. Much more people than I think we even expected. So we're definitely planning to do that every year from now on. Maybe, obviously we're not going to celebrate our 61st and so on, but we think it would be a good thing to do. The Christmas tree lights, I don't know how it went last Sunday, but the Sunday before it was a lot of fun being in the parking lot. Winding up, did you guys go this Sunday, yesterday as well?
Yeah,
You went, how was
Oh, I couldn't
it? Was
remember.
good,
it was pretty
amazing.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
There were appropriate number of volunteers. I was talking to Jonathan about it, he was there too.
Oh, yeah,
And, yeah, I learned a lot about how it's done.
right.
And we know when the time comes to talk about it, I'll give it to Jonathan, we got a little special treatment too, the library did, on this, and we'll explain how a little later on.
So that was good. So it was nice to be there and see that because the friends donated some of the funds to. I'm not sure how much we covered. I probably like the not that much, but I think we donated $1,000 towards the effort. So that was cool. We have Christmas Tree Lane Festival coming up. I think we have 3 spaces, which is amazing. So we're gonna put out a lot of stuff for sale, a lot of emphasis on Christmas books and goodies and stuff. And we also will have these lovely, I don't know if you've seen these, 2 Dina's calendars.
Oh,
Printed by Kenny, local artist, and it actually has a picture of, I'm not going to be able to find it now, am I? It has a picture of the library, yes, there we go.
Oh, great.
That's cool.
So we have, I believe, just put in an order for 50 of them, and we're going to be selling them in the bookstore, so I need to talk to Stone about that. And then also at the Christmas Tree Lane event, and we hope that they're going to be no more than $14, probably more like $13, or 2 for 24 or something like that. Just FYI, they're going to be rushing off the shelves, so better get them. Yes, and then we have our next event then is next February's Big Book Sale, so I think that's it.
Was that a recent picture of the library? It looked very
It's-
colorful.
I don't know when the painting was made, actually. I think there is more, his website is kennyarts.com, and it's and he kind of features a different month every so often, so I think there's a bit more history about it there. I don't think there's a lot of history about when he did them. But
one of them's from 1977. So this is going back a long
Yeah.
time, but we thought it'd be really popular because it's Pasadena and Altadena, and we don't usually have anything like this to sell. So hopefully it'll be a good
Great.
stocking stuffer.
Can I suggest, I don't know if this is possible, if Kenny would be willing to produce note cards with local paintings on them. I think
Christmas
those would
cards.
really sell.
Amazing
I would
as well, right?
I would buy the
Mhm.
crap out of that.
Oh yeah, yes,
Or even, I mean, even just like one of the library,
yes.
a box of 20.
Commission on, yeah.
Because everyone keeps telling me how it's so popular, and I was like, there must be these things out there already, but apparently not. So we're gonna get in on the ground. Yeah. I mean, he's obviously been doing it for a few decades, but
With that same thought in mind, there were some paintings or drawings of the building originally. Would be great to put some of those in there too.
yeah, on display.
Historically, that would be really great.
You know, maybe as part of the whole facilities process, when we have like a big community meeting or a sort of a celebratory thing, it'd be a great time to like do a big
Gallery.
installation in here.
Right.
That'd be cool if we had like
That's,
some
yeah.
of, like different representations of the library through the years and our 60th and some of the old blueprints and do like a real retrospective. It'd be really cool.
A lot of those old records have been dug up by Jonathan. He showed me a whole book of specifications and drawings for the original library, which was pretty impressive,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Or if we need to do the fundraiser, that's a big, that'd be a cool thing.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
We have 6 trifolds doing the history of the library / the Friends going, which we did for our 60th, and so we would love to donate. We would love to have that somewhere. So if you guys want even more stuff, then we have that.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Claire. So next is a district director's report.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
So I have proudly finished a full 3 weeks. I'm really glad to have participated in the strategic planning, the architectural and design town hall that I was able to go to last week. I also attended the chamber breakfast, Pasadena Community Foundation breakfast with Mark and Bridget, and much, much more. Just last week, Nicole and I flew up to Monterey and attended the Calapralra HR conference, which we learned a ton, as well as how much more we have to learn, quite honestly, about HR. We did run into some of our colleagues from Glendale, Pasadena, and other places who are a wealth of knowledge for us and are willing to help when needed, so that was really great to be able to network with them too. Let's see, what else have I been up to? I also met with all 8 of my direct reports within my first 2 weeks. I do what I call work planning with them, so it was really good to get their perspective on things. I'm also scheduling right now to meet with the rest of the staff by the middle of December. I'll have met one-on-one with everybody. So that's very good. We were so happy to have sent several staff and trustees to CLA, and I wanted to include some of their statements about their takeaway from the conference, so I'm grateful to the staff for emailing those to us, and we were able to put them in the packet. My best summary quote that was sent, I think, was how it was invigorating, inspiring, and just what I needed, and that's exactly what I think my goal as CLA chair was to get people excited about what we're doing. I also wanted to mention that I'm still reviewing the volunteer policy, which was in last month's packet. We're reviewing, hoping to bring it back in December or January. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. I also participated in the Christmas tree lane light strand creating with Claire and Katie and several other staff. And Uni got many, many volunteers to come. So now I know how to make Christmas lights, so that's a cool skill that I never thought I'd have.
Transferable.
Let's see, as far as the human resources study, I did sign the agreement with COF this afternoon and sent that off. So I do plan to get that rolling as quickly as possible so we can get that class and comp study done. So that is officially signed. We already talked about the state report. If there are any other questions that you guys do have, feel free to email me and we can get answers to you about that. And I think that's all I have, so I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
I've got just a couple of
Sure.
questions, Nikki, comments.
Okay.
It's been a few weeks now since Cindy's been gone,
Mhm.
and we engineered that little transition period. And she had a lot of issues, not a lot, but some of them had some complexity to them. Do you feel like that transfer of things were on her plate has been successfully transferred to you now, in terms of understanding exactly what to do and so on? I'm using the HR report as one of them. There were promises that we made to staff and so on about, moving this thing along. And she communicated that well with you? And
Oh, yeah, we
Okay, good.
spent 3 days together going through all of her files, the RFPs, the contracts. I know there's gonna be questions that come up, but, she's always happy to answer any questions I have. I'm still going through files and getting organized, but, yeah, we had a 4th meeting set up, but we felt like she covered as much as she could with me.
Okay, great.
So it was, yeah, I'm very grateful for that time that we had together to go through everything.
All right, any more questions, comments? And then we've already talked about the state report, is that right? Yeah, because I think that's a part of it. Okay, so now,
First,
oh, we are on the financial reports? Well, I really didn't jump ahead there, sorry about that. So, I wanted to just, in fact, why don't you do your report first, and it might answer some of the questions I have.
Okay. Okay, so these are the reports for September. As Terry mentioned, we're about a quarter of the way through the year here. We're still showing negative income, which we will continue to do until after December when we get our first major property tax payment. We had a good number for passports revenue for September. And unfortunately, the auditors contacted me and they're not ready. They were supposed to be on site today and tomorrow, but he asked for more time and it wasn't really a request because if he's not ready, he can't come. So it's been rescheduled for December 18th and 19th, but he did assure me that he'll have his presentation ready for the January board meeting to present to you guys the final audit for last fiscal year. There is an income note there. There's an income amount for the foundation. It's actually their Taste of Dina revenue that was credit card revenue. So that will be going back to them. Ultimately, once I have final numbers, I think they're still waiting on a couple of people to pick up their silent auction items. So once that's finally done, I can offer them a reimbursement check. And then there was the expense for staff training and education for September of about $6,400. But as Nikki kind of mentioned, there were several trainings that happened in September, so she went into a little more detail about that. We will be getting a refund from CLA of $2,100. They offer a discount for support staff, so that's how we were able to send so many people.
Great job.
Okay, questions?
Okay, just a couple of questions. The Friends check that they gave us doesn't get counted into revenue until November or something when you start doing that one?
Yeah, so the month that they give me the check is when it ends up in their report. I'm always 2 months behind with the
Okay.
financials.
The reason I ask is I want to make sure that
Oh, yeah, no,
I
I got it.
successfully transferred the check
Yes,
to you.
yes,
I carried around my wallet for a couple of days and it had me scared stiff. So I'm
it's
glad
in
that
cash.
you got that one.
We did ask you at the board meeting.
And then the other question I have is about when you look at the PERS contributions that we have,
Yes.
or that we're making, you talked about the property tax revenue that we get in these sort of episodes and, when it looks like we're running out of money, there's actually a lot more on the way, et cetera. What's the rhythm of those payments? Because I see a lot of the budget for that's already been taken up for the year.
For property tax
For
or for
PERS, for the PERS contributions and stuff
So
that we do?
it should just be that one, the PERS unfunded, you'll see is 100% of budget. Is that the one you're asking about?
Which page are you on there?
I'm looking at page 38, the budget versus actual.
Right. So when I look at and you're looking at line 5210,
Yeah, so 5218 is that 100% of budget. but the other two are right on track at 22 and 16%. It's just that one that we prepaid at the beginning of the year.
So that's
That sounds
the
like
issue I guess I'm after, that's the rhythm I'm looking for.
Okay.
You prepay that at the beginning of the year?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why that figure looks high at 63%
Okay,
of
good.
budget, yeah.
I mean, I'm just doing this kind of simple math, and if you go down, you look at the percent of budget that we're at on all these items,
Yes.
and the closer to 25% all of it is, the happier I am, because
Yes.
we're 25% through the year.
Yes.
And I know a lot of these things are gonna have variances and so on, but I just wanted to check that particular one.
Yeah.
And then another question, this almost is one for Jonathan too. We've only spent 7% of our capital expenditures for equipment and furniture and structure and improvements and things like that. Is there, looking through the rest of the year, are the plans to spend that in sort of an even amount to make that budget? The reason I'm bringing this up is that's possible when we do our budget review, maybe some money that needs to get shifted around would come out of this fund. So Jonathan, I guess that's almost a question for you about if we all, and you too, Nikki, if we all expect that money to be spent in its entirety this year.
So what we are gonna do is we are looking at the HVAC system, we are looking into, that's about 24,000 right there for that. We are, some of the ship ladder and the other expenses, that's running about $15,000 at the moment. There is a roof repair that we do wanna correct, that we wanna take care of, that's running about 15,000. And so there was we were looking into other specifications of such as doing some emergency lighting, but since of the review with ARG, we have to table that for a second. We want to see what their recommendations will be.
Okay.
I want to make sure that what we can do is for infrastructure base, and so like the air conditioning use, that's infrastructure. We can have a sound infrastructure here, and so some of the money we'll be using will be appropriate to spend. Some of the fixtures on the roof will be okay to do. But any other stuff like emergency lighting and type of other things that we were planning on doing, we may have to table that after the review of ARG.
Okay. And then another observation I made, sorry I'm really stuck here on financials, but it's a good thing for all of us to know. I saw that a lot of our expenses were felt in what we would all feel is a healthy way, and that is, it seems like there's been a lot of library materials, right, so it's been purchased in this first 3 months. And it's on pace to exceed that. Is that where most of your buying is, or is that something that'll happen for the rest of the year?
Yeah, and
Okay.
we just, in the last month, just trained 2 selectors, Jesse and Sue, so this coming week I'm gonna get them going so that they can start selecting for the adult collection. One thing I do have to take a really strong look at is our purchase suggestions for DVDs and Blu-rays. We receive such a high volume, and I'm really seeing that it's really consuming a lot of the budget, so I have to rethink about, do we have to start saying no, which I would hate to do, but, because it's what the public wants, but I need to take a hard look at how we handle the purchasing of those materials, because it does seem like we're getting pretty close to the whole annual budget for those expenditures, so.
Good. I mean, I like it that we're spending money on that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have, I guess, in a way, but
Yeah.
it does need to be addressed.
Okay, good, those are all the questions I have now. Oh, one other for you.
Okay.
Based on what you told us before, if the auditors are delayed a little bit, I still would love to, and it almost duplicates, I guess, what we talk about in the January meeting, but I would like to have that budget committee meeting on the 3rd week of January, the way we talked about. And at that one, it's almost a separate conversation. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more idea from the facilities committee about, what we need to start thinking of, et cetera. But having that early start on planning for how we finance improvements would really be crucial, I think, right now. All right, thank you for that time.
2 quick questions for me. Thank you for asking the capital question, because I have the same question. Kind of related to that, just 2 quick line item questions. So I noticed that the summer reading budget is only a third used up, and I was just kind of wondering what the kind of process on that, because I would imagine we use like half of it for finishing up last year's and half of it for starting next year. So are we planning like a bigger summer reading push next year, and that's why we have more budget held back? Is that?
This is actually the first fiscal year that we've had the summer reading budget.
Oh, is that right?
So I didn't even have it last fiscal year, so a lot of what was spent last fiscal year was absorbed into the various programming budgets. So
Got it.
that's
So
why
that number is
it
probably
seems
low.
low.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense, because I know we had a big program this summer, and,
we did.
okay, fantastic. My other question, we have a line item for collection agency. Who are we collecting money from?
It's only if they have a large volume of books that have not been returned for a very long period of time, they get sent to collections. It's a $15 fee.
Okay.
We do get a lot of stuff back though.
Okay. Cool. I was just curious, because I knew we had eliminated fines, so I was wondering who we were trying to chase down and fine back out.
They have to owe a minimum, I wanna say it's $50? They have to owe a minimum of $50 and they have to be, I think, over a month missing.
It would be interesting at some point in the future just to see the breakdown on like what those numbers look like, just because, you know, this is totally anecdotal and in no way a representative piece about this, but I had a conversation with somebody the other day who said, oh yeah, I used to go to the Austin Library all the time, but I haven't been in forever because, you know, I lost a book and I got a thing in the mail and I don't wanna go back. And so I just, you know, it's one thing if it's, you know, you lose a book, you have to pay for it, fine. But I never want there to be a financial barrier to use.
Absolutely.
And so I think it would be worth at some point looking at kind of what those we wouldn't know the demographics, but what the breakdown is in terms of number of people, number of fines. Is it one book that like we're trying to collect on somebody for? Cause like, that's not, that doesn't seem cool. At the same time, if you like lose a laptop, you know, you gotta pay for it.
Yeah.
So,
Christopher has all those statistics.
Okay.
We could ask him to put together a report.
There was,
Yeah, and other systems I've worked for, you do like an amnesty type week, usually during National Library Week, but being that we don't charge fines,
yeah.
so maybe it'd be some appeal to like, maybe they get a prize, I don't know, something that would entice them to bring the items back during
I
that
guess,
week, I mean, I
yeah,
don't know.
I guess I just wonder what the actual outstanding revenue is that we're trying to recover and if it's worth it. Like, what are we trying to accomplish, right, by collecting money from people?
So your method, Nikki, is like, you know, turn in your handguns and stuff and you get amnesty.
The FBI library and then by
We're, they get bazookas and all kinds of stuff.
Well,
We can get
maybe,
some books.
actually, what it could maybe be is we'll waive the collection fee. Like, maybe we do the month of April as, you know, bring your library items back, because the fee stays on the account, correct?
Yeah.
If they return,
Yeah.
so what you could do is waive the collection fee. It's like a drive to get everything back.
Did you have your hand up, Stella?
I did, I know it's a little unconventional, but I did also want to say that when people come in, I do direct staff to have them come talk to me, and there are times where I will say, okay, this is your circumstance, and I understand what it is. We do have some people that we do have what I call repeat offenders, where they give the same sob story every time. There's notes on their records so you know who they are. But then there's other people who have a very real situation, whatever that may be, where I'm, you know, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
you know, we can absorb the $15 or whatever, you know, so we do work with people, yeah.
I get that, I just, you know.
wasn't there, as I recall, something that we did one year when it came to partnering with the sheriff or fire department or something about bringing in canned goods or whatever it was. I can't recall it, whatever it was, but something.
Yeah, it was when we still charged the fines or the late fees before we had gotten rid of those. We did, we partnered with the sheriffs so that people that brought in canned goods or toys for the donation would get their, like, you know, late fees waived. We also did like fine forgiveness for the month of February, like Love Your Library, you know, but then we got rid of fines and we didn't really do that stuff anymore because people didn't have fines. It's just, it is, you know, like Nicole was saying, it has to be threshold and it's like an extended period of time. So they get a letter from us first saying, you know, these long overdue materials have been billed to your account. And there's an even more extended period of time, Stella probably knows the days, but that goes by and they kind of have the chance to then bring the materials back. And it says in the letter, if you bring the materials back, you won't be charged. But it shows them, you know, what they owe, and then from there, if they still don't bring it back, then it would go to collections.
Yeah, it just strikes me as super problematic that we're collecting on anybody. Like, I get it, but I would like to maybe review that.
Okay.
That's
And-
just a capital problem.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know what we're actually looking at.
Okay. I'm sure he could look at that. And the other thing, that I'll talk to Christopher about also is, one thing that substantially reduced fines in Glendale was we turned down auto renewal up to 3 times. So basically it eliminated fines. And I mean, we don't have fines here, but maybe if we did auto renewal for 1 or 2 checkouts or something, that's another thing that gives people more time automatically. And then it doesn't renew if there's holds, but otherwise they can keep the items. So I'll look at that, and then maybe how long that prolonged period of time is. Maybe it could be longer, so that they're not generating a collection fee.
Can you
But
do
yeah.
renewal requests through the website? I haven't tried.
And on the self-checks too, I believe, right?
And when you get the emails, because I get them all the time telling me that I'm late, is there a link in the email to do the auto renewal?
I think it just has our phone number, like if you need help.
You have
You
to
know.
like, yeah,
You have to-
I got the same one.
To call, yeah.
But you can't like click a button that says like renew this whole list of stuff. You have to like log back into the thing and then click what you want to renew, which is like not that hard,
No.
but still, if they were like renew everything.
Do we
At least
ever,
my list
those
isn't
of us
long when I
who
get
are-
the email,
Yeah.
Katie.
Thank you for checking things out.
Yeah.
Most important.
I've been a lot.
Pasadena does that auto renewal, but I
Yeah.
think they still charge fines.
Yeah, both Glendale and Pasadena
Yeah.
do. But that's part of the ILS. I'll need to talk to Christopher, because Sierra had an option where you could go auto renewal. So it's a, you know,
It's just a box you check.
yeah, a switch you flip, so.
well, the librarian, I mean, you would know if there are people who have hardships, and I know that we have some people who come and use the library who might not have the means for taking care of that, so you guys would know that, right? Okay,
Well,
wonderful.
if they tell you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how
Well,
they- you know.
sometimes they don't need to speak it. I think sometimes we can, we might know some of the people who show up, and many times they show up consistently. Okay? I just make sure that we don't penalize any of those people.
I think we should be trying to remove barriers to access as
Yes.
much as we can. Like
Mhm.
if there are legitimate things we
Yeah.
need to do, then fine, we can talk about that, but
Okay.
as many barriers as we can remove would be good.
All right, any more comments or questions? All right, we're on to the committee reports, and starting with the budget committee. And we have that last zeroed in at least on a tentative date for a budget committee meeting, which would be the 3rd week of January. And it gives the auditors enough time to get a good set of numbers in front of us, I take it, right, Nicole, for that meeting?
Yeah, they're just really presenting on last fiscal year, so I'm not
Okay,
terribly worried
gotcha,
about them. But
gotcha.
I did confirm that Cindy Byram will be available that
Yes.
3rd week for us, so
Yep.
she'll be there.
Okay, good. So and we will treat that like a regular meeting because it's a standing committee, so there'll be a notice posted and we'll let you know what's going on about that. All right,
When you settle on a date, could you just send it
I
out?
will, I'll send it to everybody so you know what date it is. It'll be sometime after Martin Luther King Day, I can tell you that, so the Monday will be, closed sometime during the rest of that week. Okay, Facilities Committee.
All right, so lots going on with the facilities. Mostly, we're very excited to kick off what we're calling our Reimagine Our Altadena Libraries. I'm going to call it a campaign. I think campaign more appropriately captures what we're trying to accomplish. So just since the last board meeting, we held our first meeting to an ad hoc committee and our team from Architectural Resources Group to really start planning out the calendar that eventually gets us to approving a plan by the full board on how we're gonna really approach and tackle updating and improving the facilities here. I just want to share one story of a community member that attended our town hall meeting here at the main branch, because I think, frankly, it's the perfect story to kind of remind us of why we're taking this on. So there was a parent whose daughter attends Aviston, and her daughter is in a wheelchair, and she shared with us that she does not come to this branch in the main library and instead goes down to Pasadena because of the access issues and the challenges that it presents to her daughter, her young daughter. And hearing that just bothered me, but also I felt much more confident that we're doing the right thing by taking this on. We should be doing everything possible to make sure that nobody in the community feels as though that they cannot come and enjoy our library. So just wanted to share that to kind of motivate all of us to keep tackling this. So we held an initial meeting on November 6th, kind of formalized our plan and weekly schedule going forward. Followed that up, I think kind of perfect timing that we are kind of wrapping up the strategic plan just as we're kicking off the facilities work. There's clearly some overlap there, and I think a lot of inspiration and information and from the community input that Katie and her team were able to get that'll help kind of inform the work of ARG going forward. Even some of the questions that we got from the community, I think we had some community members attend the town hall meetings last week that were not part of the strategic planning process, which was good to see, right? We're getting different folks from the community. But it was good because some of their questions and ideas and feedback and input veered into kind of strategy versus purely facilities, and it again reinforced our assumptions that there's quite a bit of overlap with the two. So with that process being well on its way, it allowed Terry, myself, Jonathan, and others to kind of quickly be like, well, since you're asking, this is what's going on, right? So we held the 2 town hall meetings last week. We had one at the Bob Lucas branch last Monday. We had about 8 community members attend, in addition to folks from both the Friends of the Library and the Foundation, and several staff. Nikki was able to attend, Jonathan, Stella, a few others. Carmine was there, obviously, as well. And got a lot of good feedback. I think what is clear is that folks want to make sure that library is maintained. And that I think 2 big pieces that we took away, I think the number one was that in general people don't feel like the Bob Lucas library is necessarily inviting, that there's a lot that we can do. Like if you don't already know it, you're not already a user, it's very easy just to drive right on by and not know it's a library. And so there's a lot of ideas of things we could do to really draw in more of the community. And then next on Wednesday, we held our town hall meeting here. I think we had about 13 community folks, in addition to, again, friends and foundation members and staff. I want to thank our project director at ARG, who on her own did some outreach directly to Aviston and some of the leadership and the parents there, since her daughter attends. So we had several parents from Aviston join, which was good. And I think kind of the key points that came out of that, I think none of which would surprise any of the board members, is one, preserve what the main library already is, and then find ways to better enhance some of the things that we already appreciate about it, right? So there's a lot of people talked about the views of the mountains and how amazing that is. And then ideas around how can we more bring outside into the library, right? Whether it's seating areas or all kinds of different ideas. And then obviously people, as I already shared, numerous people shared personal stories about the challenges that our accessibility issues raise. So again, just reinforcing that, the decision we made some time ago to really prioritize addressing those issues and concerns going forward. The two other things that are on here, really informational for now, but the ad hoc committee, I would say these are two issues we're seriously considering bringing before the full board. I would say one is a bit more of a priority than the other. So the first one is, and this is an issue that has come up, ARG has asked about it, and I would say it definitely came up in the town hall meeting too, and it's the idea of getting official historical status for the main branch. So there's a proposal in here from ARG that has, what the cost of that would be, what it would include, some potential positives and negatives. So really wanted to hear from the board tonight if folks have any specific questions that you would need answered on this or concerns before we put it as an action item on a future agenda. Because if necessary, ARG is willing to have their person that really specializes in this work attend one of our future board meetings if there's questions, concerns that need to be addressed. What I can say from the committee's perspective, as far as the positives and why we should do it, I think one, it would really validate the pride that the community already has in the facility, right? And its importance, historically and architecturally. Two, as we're moving forward with the facilities work, frankly, if we had historical status, it would give us and whoever we end up working with to do the actual construction and design work a bit more leeway as far as the codes that need to be met, especially around certain energy efficiencies. That's one. Two, there are, in some cases, additional grant money that you can seek if you have historical status. So for example, there was quite a few ideas raised at the town hall meeting here at the main library, specific to the grounds and the landscaping. And ARG has, we know for a fact that you can get grants to do studies specific on landscaping for architectural properties, because the project that we've approved for ARG right now does not include, we did not ask for and include landscaping study, right? So that's, if we've got the status, we can get a grant to basically cover the cost of that. The only real negative that ARG has pointed out to us, and it's really only a potential, is, obviously I don't think anybody, at least on this board, would ever think about doing it, but if somebody came up with a ton of money for a new library and, you couldn't just tear the building down and build something from scratch because it's now historical. And any, I think all of the kind of construction we're thinking about and accessibility issues is not gonna run into this, but if you were gonna do a very, very significant add-on or addition or enlargement, with the historical status, you'd have to go through a bit more to make sure that that new part of the building meets, the requirements of the historical status. But I don't think that's in the works, so I don't see that as a negative. It's just something we would need to be aware of in the future. So let me pause there before I move on to the last piece. See if there's any
I read through this pretty thoroughly, and I love the idea of getting a historical designation. I think you're exactly right, that what it does is it brings the recognition of the building into alignment with how people in town actually feel about it. You had asked kind of what more we would want to know, and I'm specifically looking at the potential benefits part on page 55, when it talks about flexibility, and you mentioned that too, flexibility in regards to requirements about conservation, accessibility, and structural improvements. I would just want to know a little more about what that means. For example, of course, you know, we don't want to, you know, diminish our efforts to make the building accessible just because we might be able to with some kind of a historical designation that has more flexible requirements. You know, I just want to know what do those things actually mean in terms of the plans that we're starting to develop and how that would actually look. You know, of course we want our building to be as energy conserving as it possibly can. But so what does that flexibility actually get us is really my question. And of course, I love the idea of being eligible for grant funds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can share a little bit more about what ARG and their team has told us is if we have the historical status, essentially they'd be able to build that into what we get as a final product from them as far as options, right? So they'd be able to, in that plan, say it's gonna cost you X to meet all of the current code on, let's say, energy efficient windows, for instance. But since you have historical status now, you have the option to go to a little bit down, and this is what it would cost, right? The only other one they did mention is they believe that we would have some additional options around how we handle the elevator situation as well. But it's more about what kind of options they'll be able to build into the plans that they submit to us versus, because I completely agree with you, and I think the entire board's on page. Depending on what they put in those plans, I think there's a lot of stuff that we clearly would seek the higher standard, especially around accessibility, right? Even if we have the option to maybe do a little less. But I'll definitely see what they can send us, or at least be available at a board meeting if we decide to agendize this, to kind of maybe give us some more details or specific scenarios.
So I had a couple questions, and I echo everything Betsy just said. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a smart move. I guess my questions would be about kind of timeline, budget, and when to do this in the grand scheme of things. So is the idea that we would, it seems from this that it makes the most sense to do National Register and not care too much about LA County.
Yeah.
Which also makes sense, and like Christmas Tree Lane is a registered landmark, so that's kind of cool. It's all in place, that makes sense. So it says it's gonna cost us like $7 to $9 grand. That would be on top of what our contract with ARG is, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is the idea that we would undertake this like functionally now, and then that would allow them to present different options in their final product, so we would need to just like jump on it quickly?
So the short answer is yes. So the committee is strongly considering putting this as an action item in our December board
Right.
meeting. That would basically allow ARG to know that we're going forward with this, so that, because we're planning on mid-January doing the next round of town hall meetings where the community could come and actually start to see a couple of options as far as plans. So if they knew that we were going forward with this, they could already start to build that into the plans.
So I guess my question, and this is maybe more of a budget question, is moving, you know, that $9 grand around, is that gonna be problematic?
That's what we're planning to discuss, the third week of January. We're
Well,
gonna-
right, but that's after when we would need to approve it, which would be in December, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking now.
Well, I think that amount is doable,
Okay.
but at that meeting at the mid-year, we can kind of move money around a little bit.
Yeah, that's why I was asking about Jonathan's budget earlier to see where it's coming from.
Because if there's a little money in there, this is functionally the same, I mean, it's not a capital expense, but it kind of is.
Yeah. I'm with you, Katie, in the timing part of it. And, you know, I think that the first thing, I believe, would be to make sure this thing has this, you know, like a bone density test, where we're making sure this is a building that's gonna survive another 50 years. And another thing that you'll see on here is a seismic study. So I think the real basic stuff about, okay, is this building worth designating as a national landmark? Is it gonna last a while, right? And are we sure solid is gonna be here for the library patrons for a while? Because my sense is if you designate it, and then, you know, you do get the miracle endowment like Jason was talking about, where we could build a new one, or if something happens to it, I wouldn't want to have to be saddled, or future boards to be saddled with a bunch of rules that they have to do. So my sense about it is, I agree we should talk seriously about getting it done, but I also think it should be a little further down the road. Especially, I mean, one thing that has to crystallize for us on this before we start talking about spending money of any kind is what is this whole thing gonna cost? And I think the variations between what ARG can bring us with, you know, a National Register designation and then doing it without it, you know what I mean? They could call out those costs and let us know what we would save and so on.
Right, well, that was gonna be my next question, is can we ask ARG to present those options and just like mark them, right? So like, as part of their planning process to say like, listen, you could do this, but this would be, you know, only if you got the historic landmark designation, would this really be a functional possibility? Or you could do this regardless. Because I think I would wanna know a little bit more about what the ROI is on that, because like, I love the state of California, but they're not known for being like super flexible on regulations around building construction. The more rules we have to follow, the more money it will cost.
So that's my understanding, that that's what they'll be able to do, but I agree, we should get some more clarity on that from them, and then be able to clearly identify that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or make sure that they build it in. So we have our next ad hoc facilities committee with ARG ahead. We do have another one planned in December 11th, I believe, right, John? Yeah, December 11th, so that'll be before the 16th meeting, before the next town hall. So that's when we can kind of start getting into some detail, like that level of detail with them.
Because that seems like it would be a very helpful part of the basically end product proposal, right? Their proposal is like, you spend X amount of money on this, you apply for historic landmark status, you do these things. That to me makes a lot of sense. I guess I would be a little hesitant to jump on board with it, even though like in theory it seems like a really good idea.
Oh, yeah, it's a great idea.
Until I know where we are in the budget.
Yeah.
And how materially it will affect what our choices are. Because if it's a difference of like $3,000-4,000, fine. But if it's a $25,000-35,000 question or north of that, then I'm really interested.
And Nikki, you've been through this before, right? In terms of the historic designation and the building project and all the other stuff with your days in Glendale, is that right?
I got there 6 weeks before they opened.
Okay.
So not necessarily, but again, Cindy would be a great resource, because I'm sure she went through that process as well.
I think we muster all of our collective experience on this, but, I mean, I agree with Jason. I'd like to see this come up for loan approval and everything else, but the prudent side of me wants to hold back a little bit until we know that the costing is really bothering me. It's like, you know, this is a $5 million project to get done successfully, then okay, where's that coming from? You know, we gotta stare down those questions before we get, you know, as enticing as this is, I think, down the road with this one. The one that I think is more important, and not to steal your thunder, Jason, but that seismic thing that he'll talk about next is pretty
That's
important.
critical. May I just ask a question? Oh, well, no, that's not it. Architectural and engineering, is that 7140 that we're talking about? I'm on page 39. Is that, the budget says it's $50,000?
Yes.
Okay, and what were their charges? What did we agree upon for their total
That's the
But
50,000.
that was the 50,000? Okay, so we're adding now, and I really think it's a great idea to do the seismic evaluation. We're talking about adding now 7,000 to 9,000 for that, right?
Right.
And you think that you might be able to find that or try to manipulate the budget in some way so that we're adding that to this figure?
Well, no.
Well, there's two different things, yeah, so,
Okay.
just so everybody's
Well,
clear,
let's,
the seismic evaluation, the proposal for that, which I haven't gotten into yet, that's a flat $8,000
okay.
is for the seismic. I mean, theoretically, we could put that out to bid and see if we got, better, but this is what,
They suggest.
ARG did for us since we're already working with them. The historic designation is the one that would be 7 to 9. So, worst case scenario, if we decide to do both, we're talking 17,000 to do both. I don't know.
You're talking.
And Jonathan, the
17,000.
facilities report that we had done in 2018 didn't get into seismic issues, right? So we've never done a seismic.
We haven't done according to what they're asking is a tier 1 type of seismic study, but it sounds like it's almost a visual as what, I hate to use, ISIS, or our facilities assessment company did. They did a visual more of it, but not as with the tier 1 from this company that ARG is suggesting. They're gonna do a little more into it. Still, it is a visual one, but it's not as comprehensive as they call when they do a slight demolition, where they do a quick, to see inside the building that's sustainable. But the book that we got from Boyd Georgie, that shows all of the specifications of the building, that can help. Also, ARG did send out and this is new to me, but ARG sent out something about after any major earthquake, was there ever an evaluation done on this building? And to the best of my knowledge, I have no idea. But I'm gonna be looking to the records. I'm still digging to see if there's any records, if anything was done. If there was anything of that nature done for that. But as far as I know, the tier 1 was not created by ISIS.
Do you wanna talk a little bit about the seismic evaluation? Or, cause I feel like in some ways these kinda go.
They kind of go hand in hand.
together. Yeah.
I honestly don't have much more to contribute than what Jonathan just shared. I mean, it's something that ARG is recommending. I think clearly, it frankly makes sense, right? I mean, everything going on as far as the city and the surrounding areas and the buildings they're looking at, anything built this long ago was built under much, much different standards. And, luckily, it's a lot of concrete, but I'm not an engineer. That doesn't necessarily mean automatic safety, right? And again, if they were to identify something, I think part of if folks remember when we were discussing putting out this RFP, a lot of the conversation we had was, we don't want to take on a major project, spend a couple $1 million, and then find out a year later we need to tear it open to do something else, right? And I think the seismic, that gets to the absolute core of the building, right? And so if something's identified that has to be fixed, it's gonna mean tearing apart part of the building to fix it. So I wouldn't wanna, put in a new elevator, attach it to the building, and then find out that whole wall needs to have something done to it. So, I mean, it makes sense. But, I think it would make sense also to ask the questions about the different levels of evaluation, right? Because I feel like if we're gonna do an evaluation, we would really want to get in there and know what needs to be done, if anything.
If I could jump here, Jason, Katie said that she would be able to come to the next meeting, and that's not that far away, to answer other questions that we may have or that we might think of, especially regarding the historic designation. I talked to her at that meeting, so that's a chance maybe in the next meeting to have her come and just talk to us, because there's so much we don't know that they will, that it would make good sense to do it. And I still, you might have a better handle on it than I do, but I still don't know how their timeline for approval and inspections and everything kind of melds with, in other words, if we took those issues up now, does it meld in smoothly with what they're trying to do? That we get certain benchmarks through their process, because we started the process early. I don't get that part yet.
Yeah, I mean, what I know is that, you know, obviously the sooner, if we are gonna move on either of these or both, the sooner we do it, the better, right? On the historical status, if we want that to be integrated into the plans they're working on, we really need to approve that, I mean, frankly, December, right? Because they're drafting options and plans for us, for the community to be looking at in mid-January. I feel like even though it's more important in some ways, the seismic thing, even if we were to approve that in December, by the time you initiate that work, unfortunately, we've already started the ARG assessment, right? So, like, I don't know how many weeks it would take even after approval for the seismic study to be done and then get it back. And, you know, at that point, we're already evaluating essentially a final proposal from the ARG. Like, I think that's the one challenge as far as where we're at, just timing on both of these.
Let me ask a question if I can, because I want to make sure I'm understanding the moving parts in the right way. I mean, it seems to me, and please correct me when I say something that's not accurate, because I have just read the reports, but it seems to me that, like, it's true, the seismic study is really so intensely structural, and it's at the heart of everything. And I guess I don't understand how ARG could have a final set of visualizations for us that don't take that into account if it's something we want to do, right? Like, if,
Because we didn't I mean, one, and that's part of the reason why this is more money, we didn't ask for that when we put out the RFP,
Right.
And so, I mean, again, it is structural, right? So I don't know how much it would impact, if at all, the items that they're identifying and the work that we've asked them to perform as far, you know, like their priorities are accessibility issues here at the main branch, right? And then incorporating the facilities stuff from Jonathan's report, which is none of that is structural, right? That's all like mechanical and plumbing and electrical. That'd be here, and then, you know, Bob Lucas isn't part of either of these points, but I mean, in theory, you know, what we're gonna end up with the ARG thing is we're gonna end up with a plan that has rough sketches, right? It's not engineering plans, it's not architectural schematics. It's gonna be rough sketches, and then it's gonna be kind of a, here's the way that you could phase this all in, right? And here's what the costs would be. That, you know, we would then have to figure out, like Terry's point, where are we gonna get the money from, and then hire a firm to actually do the design build. So I think one thing that we need to ask ARG on the seismic, and I think something that the board would need to consider is getting an understanding of how much, if at all, does this affect their work versus we need to have this done before we do the design build phase, because that's where engineering firm, architectural firm, we need to know if there's additional items that need to be addressed.
right, makes complete sense. I guess what I'm trying to work out is what is the downside to pumping the brakes a little bit on ARG's process to allow the seismic work to be done? Because if they're gonna present to us some rough ideas and also a phased sort of timeline and some cost estimates, I mean, that will vary dramatically if it turns out that we need to like redo something super integral to the building versus, well, it's all kind of fine. And I would much rather know that before we get their final word on it, rather than say, well, if we had known this 6 months ago, like it's always, I know it's not free, but it's always cheaper to do it on paper than it is to try to redo it later. And I guess I know we have a sort of schedule laid out with them, and I respect that. I guess I wonder how much does it mess things up if we just slow down a little bit to let one or both of these happen first, and how does that impact their work?
Yeah, I think that's a question we can ask when we meet with them on the 11th, and, yeah.
Going back, these, so I just made a quick phone call to one of my go-to people, and if they are structural engineers, as these people are, with a tier one evaluation, yes, it is a site evaluation, but they're structural engineers, and their report will be, it's sound, it should be sound, and everything else. But please forgive me, Jason, if I'm incorrect about something. Did they not say that, when they would do their, the drawings, wherever the concepts that ARG would come up with, they would factor in, if we did the seismic study on here, they would factor, it would be, prudent to have this done, because they could factor in, they could work around what, they could say, well, if we're gonna do this, you may need a shear wall, or you may need something here at that time. So yes, this is.
So this seems like it would need to happen first.
Right, but they said it wouldn't delay their process, that's the thing about it, Jason, remember they said it would not
Yeah.
delay their process.
No, but I don't think you're correct, Jonathan, because the quote was saying 3 to 5 weeks for a deliverable on
Right.
the seismic, which
Right.
seems quicker than the historic, because you're hiring somebody versus dealing with the federal government. So, yeah, but I agree, we have some clear items to work through on the 11th, to get a kind of handle on the scheduling piece, and get a true sense from them. And then we'll follow up on having somebody from the firm present if we decide to put these on the agenda on the 16th.
Yeah, the 16th, I think she'll do it. And what we should just do, I think, is put these both as action items on there. We want to table one of
Yeah,
them
we
or
can
the other,
always
and just
postpone
say,
it.
okay, we're gonna delay this one, we're gonna vote this one in. And, but we'll hear a lot more about stuff we don't know about from Katie, she volunteered to come.
And then to both Gwen and Katie's points, I think it would be good from a budgetary perspective to have some rough idea if we're gonna agendize these, like, at least be thinking about where are some areas we might be able to, because we're talking about 17,000 that's not budgeted, right? So.
17,000 for the seismic.
For both.
No.
For both of them
For
together.
both
Yeah, so
together.
Yeah, so it's
And would-
8,000 for the seismic,
Uh-huh.
and then between 7 and 9, depending on the fees and stuff for the historic.
Okay,
So
and,
60.
okay, and then, ARG now they're the architecture and structural designers on that, but they're not, are they the ones that we're going to have them to do the seismic? Or is that going to have to
No.
go,
No, it's
we're gonna
not.
have to bid that out, right?
No, well, we could decide to bid it out. What ARG put together for us is a quote from the firm that they use to do the seismic on all of their projects.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so if you, even if folks were to go back through the board packets and look at the RFP response that we got from ARG, they have a lot of detail in there about what is in-house and what they basically subcontract out.
Okay.
And this was one of the services, it's a service they offer, but it's through a subcontractor.
Well, and one of the big points of the ARG's table is their work on like historical and so I mean, I would really trust their recommendation on the seismic firm more than like.
Yeah, we didn't have to be able to go back to them if something
Just
was
'cause
wrong.
Well, right,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
know
yeah.
what to ask for and they have a relationship.
I just had noticed something in the historical designation part of the packet, on page 56, it does, and this may be a question that you could ask them for a little more detail on, Jason, at the very top when it talks about the difference between being called eligible versus actually having completed the whole process of becoming listed on the National Historic Register. It sounds like, some of the benefits of going through this process could accrue earlier than 9 months from application, in terms of adherence to codes or eligibility for grants or whatever. So I would be curious to know if ARG could let us know how, if we decided to do this, what's the typical length of time before we can call ourselves or be called eligible for the designation versus actually completing the process and actually being designated.
And can we kick that $9,000 to our next budget year because we'll have more flexibility. If we're in, or do we have to only have the money up front,
I mean, we're asking for the study, we're asking for it to be done now if we approve it.
Well, but I think that's Betsy's question, right? Is there a middle ground of eligibility without us going through all that? Right, can we be pre-qualified essentially, as opposed to, with the intent that we're gonna pursue it,
So almost telling them
we're gonna,
Well,
they're gonna do it, build it into the plans,
and then pay for it. I
right?
agree with
But then don't actually, we could have them start it in May or have them, right? Because you're right, I mean, the reality is we're gonna get a final thing from them at this point, based on the schedule that's been reviewed. Best case scenario, we're voting to adopt it at the end of March meeting. Then it's gonna take us probably way longer than we would hope to figure out the funding mechanism. And we can't really move forward with an RFP for design build until we know we can get the money. I mean, really, if we're honest with ourselves, we're talking, we're in 2022 before we're hiring a design build firm. Honest, right? So I think it's a good idea to mention to them about.
And figure out what they might need from us, whether that's a resolution of intent or a full, straight up, we're gonna do, or if it's just enough for us to be yeah, I mean, we're interested, we'll side act. Just to see kind of what level of commitment they would need.
And the page that Betsy referred to there, 56, talks about merit, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime marketing opportunity for the library.
Absolutely.
So to take that and put it in a season, whatever it is, where it's the optimum part, for fundraising or for people talking about it. Frankly, the cynic in me says the closer you get this to 2024, the better, because people are a lot less likely to vote on your property tax assessment, for a bill that has just been named to the National Register.
Yeah.
There's a real sense of pride in that,
Yeah.
that the whole community would jump on board with. And on the other side, to have a little bit of a dialogue and a little bit of talking points going forward, there's gonna be, I bet, a surprising number of people who might object to it as well. So that idea about getting the community involved would be a good way to go.
Well, they all know now.
Yeah, yeah, if they're watching.
Good, bad, or otherwise.
Are you straight?
All right, so can we agree then, Nikki, that you'll put this on, then you'll make it an action item, we'll bring this up again. You or me or both, we can call, or Jason too, can call Katie. In fact, you need probably be the best one, Jason, see if she can make it to the meeting and give us a little bit more on December 16th.
December 16th, I'm gonna be gone.
All right, it's 6:30. Does anybody need a break? I don't think we've got that much more to go, but I wanted to offer that. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
So the next one is Strategic Planning Committee.
So, we're in really good shape, we're in sort of the final stretch here on that, so thank you all so much for your feedback, and we're incorporating that into the final draft. So what Nikki and Margaret Sullivan and her team and I talked about was basically coming up with essentially 3 deliverables. So one would be what you might think of as an executive summary, a short, almost storytelling document that's like got a lot of photos, it's got the mission, the vision, the values, easy to understand, very accessible, sort of the highest level takeaways that we can use for public engagement, for community outreach, for all those conversations where we're starting, to engage people in what we're trying to do, something the staff can use, day in and day out in a really user-friendly and immediate way. Document number 2 is much more like the one that you guys saw, right? So the sort of more in-depth, here's our process, here's what we did, here's why we did it, here's sort of the breakdown so that it's more procedural, I think is the best way to say it. So it's a little bit more in-depth, gives the breakdown for anybody who's interested, but it also provides sort of a baseline for the next time we go back and do strategic planning for like, what did we look at, what were the metrics we used, how did we do it, what were the decisions we made, so that if it's, 5 years in the future and it's a totally different group of people, all that information is available and we don't have to start from scratch to try and guess what process they went through, which was a challenge in this strategic planning process. And then the third document is just basically an assembly of all the data that we've collected. So all the stuff from town hall meetings, from the survey, from any kind of community engagement from the staff, all of that data wrapped together in something that we can use, but hopefully our partner organizations can use as well. Because I can imagine that like the town council would be very interested, and other community groups would be very interested in some of the data we collected. So those 3 in sort of varying levels of accessibility from very user-friendly to pretty wonky. And I think that really covers our bases and it gives people the level of detail that they would want to have. All of it will be on the website, all of it will be publicly available, but that there's something that kind of hits all 3 columns. So the goal is to have certainly documents 1 and 2, we're still working on collating some of the data because the community survey just closed. I want to say 4 or 5 days ago. We were running it a little longer to see what we would get. So we'll have the high-level summary and the procedural document in the December board packet for you guys to approve. And then ideally we'll have the data one as well, but if not, you'll see it in January because we need just a little bit more time to figure out how to kind of visualize and crunch some of that data to be really useful and not just a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. So yeah, that's where we are. We are in pretty good shape. Almost there. Oh, and I meant to say one more thing. The goal is to, just on the timeline, to get a draft version of documents 1 and 2 by the first week of December. So that'll come to the committee and to Nikki and the staff for some review and some perusal and make sure it's, working for everybody, it's copacetic. So there'll be a little internal review process before we hit the 16th, so we won't be late, at every first.
Okay. Any questions, discussion?
Just kudos.
Yep,
Almost
good job.
there,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
Very good.
So close.
The applause comes when we actually vote, right? Okay, California Voting Rights Act Committee.
So there's not anything happening on this right now, but I have this thought this week and I thought, well, I'll just bring it up. So one component of this whole redistricting process that we're gonna go through is the census, right? Like that's the foundational data set that builds our redistrict. And I know that like Jesse's working on some census outreach stuff, but I wonder if one potentially useful function of this committee for the next 4 months or so until the census actually happens is to think about ways of working on outreach and census engagement and getting people counted, because the more accurate our counts are, the better our districts are going to be and the more fair they're going to be, more representative they're going to be. So I think that might be, until we have that data, there's nothing that we can do on the district drawing function anyway. Although I do want to find out if this demographer is on board or not. Like, we need to get him nailed down. And I have not, like, jumped on that. So, Kylan, let me know if you need me to, like, find his house or something. But I want to get him contracted because I think, like, if we can have some kind of agreement, everybody in the world is going to be redistricting after the 2020 census data comes out. So, I want to get him locked in.
Yeah, I think we could probably get it on an agenda. When I talked to him, what that might cost.
I think
because
it'd be
know
smart,
ahead of
I think
budget.
it'd be smart to do that in the first quarter. But regardless of that, I do think some serious work on the census might be helpful.
So would it make sense for you and I to meet with Nikki and talk about ways in which
Yeah.
we can, you know, because you guys are doing that as staff, I don't wanna be at cross purposes or, you know.
Well, as the packet said, we did apply for a $2,000 grant, which we're hoping to exclusively put into the outreach component. It does allow you to purchase technology as well as like marketing efforts, but really if we could use it just to like get out and assist with the collection of census information. You know, our plan is to have at least 2 computers at each site that are designated for filling out the census, but then also trying to do pop-ups in different places to capture people that maybe need help and aren't coming to the library to fill out the census. And maybe the subcommittee could assist with those outreach efforts
Well,
or
'cause
things like that.
I feel like there's such an opportunity here to partner with community organizations and town council and
Mhm.
other groups to really like amplify our outreach. And I think if we, you know, kind of jump on that sooner rather than later, there's still enough time to actually mobilize. So yeah, I think maybe Betsy, you and I should sit down with
Sure.
community and
Yeah.
figure out what we can do to be helpful.
Yeah, I'm also putting my feelers out to, I know Michelle Pereira, who's the director in Pasadena, is working on it on a national level. There was a ALA task force on census, so I wanna talk to her about what they're doing, because I'm sure, I know she has a pretty solid plan already too.
Sweet, we can steal that homework, that'd be great. Love it.
Okay, trustee reports? Where do you wanna go?
Not so much a report, I guess more of like a question / conversation with the staff. So I remember when some of us were running and then even into the early beginnings of this new board, when we were thinking about the strategic plan, and I think I brought this up a bit after I came back from the Seattle ALA conference, where there was a lot of discussion about how libraries are dealing with the homelessness situation all across the country. And at the time, the general feeling was that, whether it's good or bad, we weren't really struggling with that problem in Altadena. But recently, there's been a lot of hullabaloo, I personally think, blown out of proportion compared to the problem for Altadena in the community, and frankly, most of it, in my opinion, not constructive and negative. And I'm just wondering if the staff have either felt that recently or dealt with it, but if it's something that we do need to take another look at as far as how, if it's an issue that we need to be aware of and make sure we have a plan, that, whether it's outreach or making sure that we have information on services and that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's come up in the library specifically, or if it's just a community issue at this point.
So, I guess I could say that I feel like what we experience at either location is kind of consistent. We have some patrons who we see on a regular basis. We know that they're part of the regular Altadena community, if you will. Whether we see them inside our walls or on our properties. Then we have another segment of what would be more of a transient homeless population. You'll see somebody who's here for a week, they're gone, they come in, they use the facilities. So we see both types of populations. We do have some that occasionally do get out of hand, and we have to address situations with them. But I don't feel that the situation is growing dramatically. Like I say, I feel like we're kind of at a consistent pace in terms of what we experience. I will say that we just found out a week ago that we did get approval. We are going to be part of a training process through the California State Library that's going to be a 4-month mental health initiative. So we'll have 5 staff that will be trained, and each month they're going to learn topic,
Very cool.
and then they'll train staff. And one of the outcomes of receiving this funding is that you have to present a program in May with some sort of support support group in your community, dealing with some sort of health wellness topic. And I was hoping that we could focus it on the homeless, and that's one of the things that I wrote in my application. Now, whether we actually do programming on that topic will remain to be seen. But in terms of just helping staff to get more bearing on how to do it, we will be undergoing a training that is offered by the California State Library. So I don't know if that kind of helps.
No, I just wanted to put it out there.
I think our public services staff is at the forefront of their minds,
Mhm.
because we have talked and still a lot of workshop when we did the strategic planning about staff training.
Mhm.
And one of the topics that came up was like leveraging community partnerships, and they spoke specifically about resources that they could direct patrons to.
Mhm.
There was a specific staff member who said that, they had to look up like where, this patron could go if she was at risk for homelessness or, was having those challenges. And our staff is pretty good at, research and finding those resources, but they definitely have expressed the need to have more tools to assist people with and to recommend, referrals and things like that. So,
Mhm.
definitely, I think they're thinking about it. I don't think it's like this huge prevalent problem they're dealing with,
Yeah.
every single day, all day long, but I think that they're thinking about it, that they want to be able to help people if, people need it or they ask for it.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, the sense I have is that the problem hasn't gotten worse, it's that it's finally reached a couple of communities that haven't had to face it, unlike the rest of Los Angeles, right? And so let's be real, it affects all of us, and there needs to be positive, strategic ways that we're trying to make sure we're helping our community, not some of the comments that I've been. But that's good to hear all of that, so thank you.
Yes,
To add to that, though, I do know in recent conversations with several librarians in local communities, like, for example, I believe it was Glendora, I want to say, or Azusa, because of where the train line stops, they are seeing dramatic
An influx.
influx and increase. But I think because of our location, we're not experiencing that. So there are some communities that are very recently experiencing much more activities at their libraries. And it could just be because of where they are on the metro system and so forth.
So one thing that I think this is a big opportunity for is like really good partnership work, and I think particularly about Union Station, who just opened their amazing location on Lincoln, which is in Altadena, it's in our service district. And, I was having this conversation with Ann Niski, who's the CEO of Union Station, and she said something really impactful that has stuck with me that I think about a lot. And she said, in a lot of countries around the world, there are sort of socioeconomic classes of people that are historically impoverished. They are poor, they may be unhoused, and they have networks of community that exist because there are it happens over generations. And she said in the United States, what really sets homelessness apart is the lack of connection, that people end up in this situation because of a failure of connection and community. And, I think about the work that we do, and I think we have this really unique opportunity, not just to help people who are experiencing homelessness when they're experiencing it, but before and after, right? People who are in maybe permanent supportive housing, or people who are seeing their property, who are seeing neighborhood prices go up and up and up, and are maybe one missed paycheck or one medical emergency away from homelessness. I think that if we could figure out, and ideally we could partner with Union Station or other groups that are thinking about this really critically, but if there's a way to partner on either end of that, I think it would be super smart, because I think there are a lot of people who are very visibly the face of this, but there are a whole bunch more people who are our neighbors and our patrons and our, people that we would not identify as homeless or, and it's super critical, and I think we have a chance to do something important.
Jonathan knows this story because we had a staff development day where we had to share and things like that, but I will say that I was the homeless, very young adult, pregnant at 18, and that's what brought me to the library. And I will just, that's so close to my heart, and that's why I really am passionate about, the work that we all do. Because I didn't use the library. I admit that, I just didn't think about it until I really needed it. And, I had to go use the computers to try to find a job and a place, and, it was there for me. So I'm sorry to get all emotional, but it's just, it makes me feel really good that you guys are talking about this and thinking about this, because I don't think, people don't really think about that. They think, oh, that person needs a shelter, they need that, and it's not always that. Sometimes they just need a library.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I really appreciate you sharing that because I just experienced that with another very close relative. And one of the things I think is really important, because we're right next door to the senior center, we need to make sure that we sort of partner with them, because some of the people come over there who do need, sometimes it's just to talk to people. Sometimes it's just to share with folks and to an encouraging word. And there are people who come there to take a shower. So, that might be one of the places that we really need to look to as we think about partnering with others that are in this vicinity in this area. And I appreciate you talking about resources that you might be working on to compile that, because it really would be helpful for people to know where they can go and what have you. My church, Metropolitan Church, we have people who are there sometimes who just come in and sit. And we don't turn them away. And if they ask us for food and what have you, we try to provide that, as well as for shelter. But that's what I think that's what communities do for people. That's why we are here, not to talk about it, not to, but just to be of a source of help. And I'll leave it at that. But your points are well taken.
So 2 Fridays ago, we had the launch of Growing Together Pasadena.
Right.
And that, I think, effort in itself it embodies a lot of what we're talking about right now. I talked to, I think it was an organization called Young and Healthy, where they go out to the schools and they provide dental training, knowledge, and as well as services to kids, but also helping the parents get signed up for Medicaid or insurance if they don't know how, or you know what I mean. So, but I would love to see a way to help staff become more familiarized with those organizations, but as well as others, because really I think we can be the strong connectors to all of these resources in the community. Sometimes it's not shelter or food, it's just someone that can help them with a process or something that's an obstacle that they don't know how to get through.
Right.
So I think that partnership right there, it will keep building upon that to other things besides just the early education aspect.
One of the other groups that I think I would really recommend that we add to a resource list is Foothill Family Services. They are really, well, I work with them by volunteering with their back to school event, and it's amazing the things that they give away just prior to school opening. There's a Thanksgiving time, and then they give away Christmas and kids as well as, families. Just ask them to call them. There's a Pasadena branch, and then there is a Foothill branch. Monrovia is the other place. So put them on the list as a resource because they can be of service to us. And they, of course, will refer people out for health care, all kinds of services that people might need. So whereas I don't always work for the library, I do represent the library in a number of ways.
All right, it's a good discussion. Is there anybody else, trustee report?
I've got a few things to add. I was delighted to see Claire at the Union Station fundraiser earlier this month, and I would just reiterate our connection with them is critical. Just today, I was hiking up at the Cobb Estate near where I live, and I saw these two people walking up the road up there with T-shirts that said LAHSA, and I didn't automatically know what that stands for, but it's the Los Angeles Housing Services Agency, I guess. And you might have seen, sadly, maybe a month or so ago on Nextdoor or in the news, that there was a woman found deceased up there who they thought was an unsheltered person. And so it's part of their rounds now to just look around and make sure that they're finding people that might need help. So that, that's a big county-wide agency, but they're right here in our town. And I did stop and talk to them and mention the library and that, sometimes that's an issue that we're dealing with here. So that would be a good agency to make sure we have connections with as well. I also went to the Growing Together Pasadena launch, and it was so interesting to just go booth to booth. And I felt like my role there was to say, don't forget about the library, don't forget about the library. There's 3 of them here, at least I think there were 3. But, there was foster care folks, healthcare folks, people doing parenting education, people doing gun safety, transit, and I'm just so astonished at how many situations like that I find myself in where people don't automatically think of the library. To us it's kind of duh, it's such a no-brainer. But I know we're all out there doing this, but everywhere we go, to just remind people, don't forget about a connection with the library, because we're already doing all this stuff, So that was my little ambassador thing there. I guess 2 other things I want to say. One is I came to there was an event here Saturday afternoon that Helen, forget which last name it is, but it's the Adult Services Helen, I think, helped to organize with NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and it was amazing. There were that was kind of a modestly attended program, but she said she may very well try to repeat it, because what was featured were 2 people who have been through mental illness experiences and issues, and just talking about it. That's what they call it in our own voices, talking about their experiences, and as part of the effort to remove stigma or trying to fight stigma, which is one of their missions. I'll just say part of why I'm here is because I've got serious mental illness issues in my own family, and it was so moving to hear people just talk so openly about what happened to them and how they got help. And there was a fantastic video that they showed with lots and lots and lots more people talking about their own experiences. So there was a woman who was here in the audience who suffers from mental illness herself, and one of her children does too. And so just talking about, she was asking, so how do I talk to my daughter about mental illness? And one thing I did encourage Helen to consider is, if she decides to do another program like that, is to have one that is specifically for families or for parents, because working where I do in K-12 education, man, there's so much anxiety and, you know, their kids are really suffering from mental health, illness issues. So I was so gratified to see us feature that topic here, and I hope that there's a lot more of that. It was kind of funny, last week was National Mental Health Awareness Week. Helen didn't even know that, and it was so amazing that I just figured that's why it was happening, but there were all kinds of mental health stuff going on at my school last week, so kudos about that. Lastly, I just wanted to say, I'm still working on my notes that I just took pages and pages and pages of notes at CLA, and every single workshop that I went to, I just thought, oh wow, there's just so much here for what we're doing in Altadena, and I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna write it all down, and I'm gonna bring it. So it's, you know, it's not like it has an expiration date, but I'm still working on that. So
Right. A couple things from me, and that is that on Sunday, yesterday, God, it seems like longer than I showed up for the Christmas tree leaning thing that they're doing in the parking lot. Jonathan with a bunch of volunteers and stuff. It was really fun, and so I finally figured out how to get those lights up there, because they let me try, you know, hoist them up and everything. And the little bonus thing that we got as a library, I wanted to point out, we got 9 strands of lights on our tree, which is a big deal. And that means our tree back here is the most well-lit tree in all of Christmas tree land. So that's a good thing, and we're talking about that. So it's weird, somebody was talking about, it's been a long time, it's been floating around this idea for a long time of getting them involved, and I'm really glad we did. I mean, they're a good group and very professional, so that was a lot of fun. I went to the town council meeting earlier, they're dying to meet you, so I'll pass you off for the next one. And the reason I bring this up is that they really seem engaged about what's going on at the library, and about, I'm gonna say, a third of the town council population showed up for the 2 meetings that we had for the facilities group, and they were engaged and really giving a lot of feedback and stuff. I talked to Lieutenant Canchola, who was the acting captain after Captain Stuckey left, and you know, kind of renewed with him the idea that he is available, and this kind of is for you, Nikki, to do a walkthrough. And while we're doing all these ideas about facilities, rehabilitation, and so on, he will give us kind of a sheriff's perspective on security, where maybe we need to put cameras or beef up things and so on. So he's available. I reminded him of that, which will be a nice thing to do. And then I gave a talk here about a week ago that seemed to be a pretty good, you know, got a good crowd and everything about Antarctica, and that was a lot of fun. I kind of got in over my head on the preparation for it, but it went okay. And,
it was fantastic.
I don't remember.
If you missed it, you really missed.
I'm sorry?
It was fantastic.
Oh,
Went pretty good, he's saying. It was fantastic. It was standing room only. Literally, it was people were standing in the back. And could you just say, because for those, because I didn't know until I came to your presentation, what these are?
Well, these are that's where I got in over my head, frankly, because I thought, oh, that'd be a good idea. I'll put them up on the wall, and I had no idea. But this is a project I actually consciously thought about before I went to Antarctica, and there's an explanation thing at the end, where every night at sunset I took a picture from the boat, usually, or always, of the sunset in Antarctica. It went from March the 20th to March the 29th, and the kind of hypothesis of this was that I would show how the weather changes so dramatically there every night, and you can see from these photos that it does. So they came out good and got a lot of good feedback from that. So it was really a fun thing to do. And then I don't know, Claire, if we've already talked about the book pitch party. Did we talk about that at the last meeting?
I was going to ask if I could say one more thing about that, actually.
Okay, yes.
Because, if you don't mind, because I forgot to say that if you go to our website, the Friends website, so it's altadenalibrary.org/friends, there are tons of photos from that pitch party up there, including Terry doing, and his wife doing, Mary, right, doing fantastic pictures. And in fact, Mary's ones are great because it shows how many people were in the audience, all completely glued to what she was saying. And we had 16 pictures, such variety, and so you can read, and our photographer, who was fantastic, a guy called Tom Ruffner, who's a Friends volunteer, he took these amazing photos of every single person who pitched. And also a photo of Cindy getting her Lifetime Achievement, and also a photo of you accepting the almost $30,000 check for the library, so.
Yeah, and as I told the crowd there, they were raising their guidance, basically, the Friends were for the year. You know, they pledged amount and then they upped that. I mean, if they were a
And this-
company, their stock would have gone way up.
Yeah, that's what we keep doing, that's what we did the last one, right? We're like,
Yeah,
oh,
no,
we
it
wrote the
was
check wrong and this one.
very nice.
And there's another 4,000 going to those two other events, the
Oh.
Change the Music series and the Butchering Cookies, so.
That's fantastic. And the, so I don't know if we got much mention of this last time, I can't remember, because it was on November the 4th, wasn't it?
It's the second.
Second.
I think, yeah.
But it was a great event, and you talked about just repeating it, right? Because there were a lot of people that came, and the pitching was really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So it was great.
It really seemed to, everyone stayed pretty much. I mean, I know you had, some
Yeah, we
people had to leave early, but people were staying the whole way through because 3 minutes or slightly longer in some cases, you know, it just went from one thing to another, and I think people were just having a good time. They weren't getting bored listening to, 20-minute speech about something. They were just like, there was non-fiction, there was fiction, there was children's, there was adult, there was, it was so much fun. And all the volunteers were amazing, and the Friends, I think pretty much every Friends board member and volunteer was there working on it. But it was really good.
It was a repeatable event, let's put it that way, so I hope that
Thank
happens.
you, and thank you for pitching. And Terry pitched his brother's book,
Yeah.
which I have to go and check out from the library now, because I really want to read it.
Yeah,
When
I
when
gave
is
it to, I gave it
Yes.
to, little nepotism, huh? You never heard of it. All right, anyone else? All right, we'll move on to unfinished business, and that'll be the Brown Act. This is our final one, right, Cameron?
Is this the policy?
Is it, or do we have to do it in December?
Oh, December, yeah.
I just wanted to say a positive note after my little hormonal breakdown. I really became a lifelong library user after I needed the library. I went into a library and was like, wow, look at everything they have here. And, I have seen that experience a lot with people that come in for various reasons. I took my son to story time.
You see this?
When Blockbuster closed, we could go to the library for movies. So I just want to say that, being there for people can also turn into, a positive experience. They don't always come when they need you. They want to come back and, and now I work here. And I actually, when I applied for this job 4 years ago, it was a temporary position, and I had another job offer. And I turned it down because I wanted to come work at the library. The thought of working at the library was so exciting that they even offered me more money. And I was like, no, I wanted to come work at the library. Didn't know if it was going to be 4 months or 6 months. And, now it's been almost 4 years. So.
That's great.
Glad to have you.
Okay, so I went to the CSDA Board Clerk Conference 2 weeks ago, also in Monterey, and that was my third conference. And so what I liked about this conference this year is that they really focused the workshops on new developments in things like the Brown Act or the Public Records Act, elections. They weren't kind of just going over the same stuff. They were really trying to focus on cases and things that had happened in the last couple of years. So that's just a funny comic right there. But this will kind of be about the Brown Act and public comment. I just wanted to start with this video, which you might have all
In
seen.
2007, they chose to create a mosquito control district to, control mosquitoes. It's run by two men who, as you will see from an amazing YouTube video of one of their public meetings, are almost heartbreakingly conscientious, regardless of the fact that there is no one else in the room.
It's on stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Both players.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chair will call the roll. Vice Chair, Mr. Rancho, present. I'm here.
Come on! You have got to admire their dedication to the rules. These two men are so scrupulous, they would sit at a broken red traffic light for 6 hours in the middle of the night. Red is red, we live in a civilized society. Red is red, we stay. In fact, they ran that 43-minute meeting so meticulously, they even took input from the public with predictable results.
Any members of the public wishing to speak? Seeing none.
Okay, so, as we all know, the public must be able to participate at every meeting. And the opportunity to comment must be either before or during consideration by the board, but before action. First Amendment rights are huge. They really drilled that into us at this workshop. What's interesting is I actually was at a Pasadena City Council meeting a couple weeks ago when they were talking about that. Well, they're dealing with housing issues in Pasadena, the moratorium on rent control and all that. So, you know, there were some really passionate, I'll just say, public comments at that meeting. They bleeped them out on the video, so I wouldn't say go to the website. But what's interesting about Pasadena is that they have adopted a policy that if that happens, they then read, you know, the mayor reads a little script kind of that says, you know, we don't encourage that, but we recognize that people have the right to free speech, and, you know, they kind of go into that. And they didn't have to kick anyone out. LA City Council, I have definitely seen them, you know, remove disruptive individuals. But they just, you know, mentioned that there are limitations. You can limit the time for a particular speaker or for a particular agenda item. It's the government code language. So they also talked about the committee exception, which is if a board committee has already considered this item and then it goes to a regular meeting, if a speaker came to that committee meeting and spoke on that same item, then technically you wouldn't have to give them the opportunity to comment at the regular meeting because they were already afforded the opportunity to speak on that item. So there was, we'll do this one first. I thought I put these in order. Okay, so this was a case that they talked about from 2018. There was a gentleman who came to a City of Long Beach meeting and spoke for 3 minutes, and then staff and presenters that were invited to the meeting were asked to speak, and he got up to speak again. They told him, you already had your 3 minutes, and so basically he sued the city and said that they violated his free speech and the Brown Act, and the court ruled in the city's favor, and then it went to Court of Appeal and they affirmed. So what they said was that he said that they were limiting him because he was talking negatively and everyone else was, you know, praising this project or whatever they were talking about, but really they had already given him his 3 minutes. So it wasn't about what he was saying. He had already said his negative comments during his public comment, and then they recognized that, you know, there was no policy for the City of Long Beach to limit presentations or staff members. They didn't have to do that. They were allowed to limit the public comments. So that was one. So the special meeting. I don't know what happened. Sorry. So special meeting, same thing. You just hit that thing at the top, Jonathan, with the little play button. Okay. From current. Okay, so there was a case where someone came to a committee meeting And then they went to a special meeting for the city of Los Angeles the following day, and they told him that he couldn't speak on this matter because they had already spoken at the committee meeting. And the trial court ruled in the city's favor because they were citing the committee exception that I mentioned earlier. But the Court of Appeal reversed it and basically cited the Brown Acts before or during consideration of an agenda item. And what it boiled down to is that you can't use the committee exception for special meetings, that it was only regular meetings that could be used for. This is my last
Go ahead.
city.
Oh, what up, council? My name is Chad Kroger. I'm here to speak on the newly approved budget. I used to think finance was whack, but then I became treasurer of my frat and learned that a solid budge and good times go hand in hand. I went over your new budge with a fine-tooth brush, and it's pretty fire, but I believe you guys missed some stuff. 1, we need citywide Wi-Fi. Data usage has strained the relation with my parents. 2, more public places to work out. Doesn't have to be a squat rack or anything, just more bars. New York has this thing called scaffolding for pull-ups. It's pretty tight. 3, an anti-carbohydrate campaign similar to the DARE program. 4, more Coachellas. There's 50 other weekends in a year. Let's use them right. 5, my green initiative. Everyone gets a beer bomb. Red Solo cups are destroying our oceans. 6, a 12-foot tall steel statue of Paul Walker. Estimated cost a mere 50 to 500 thou. Thank you.
What up, council? My name is JT Parr. Chad didn't have time to say all the things we care about. These things should also be in the budget. 7, streets where you can drag race legally and more safely. In a country called Germany, they have a road called the Autobahn where you're not the hall. We could have the fast freeway. Imagine listening to My Hero by the Foo Fighters without a speed limit. 8, wave pools for inlanders. I'm a huge believer in the restorative nature of strongly moving water. 9, lightsaber research and development. I think they're inspiring, and I'm not alone. On another note, hoverboards, but hoverboards that actually hover. 10, free oysters on Valentine's Day. Aphrodisiac. Let's encourage citywide romance. 11, repeal all no shirts, no shoes discrimination policies. We should all be able to walk around shirtless. Thank you.
So, this was the June 6th, 2018 LA City Council meeting. Now, that one is actually very interesting because someone did get kicked out of the meeting, and what they cited at that time was that what the public commenter was commenting on was not within the city's jurisdiction. And then there was another woman who went on this like profanity-laden hate speech, and they just let her talk. But LA City Council, they only have 90 seconds for every comment. And these guys actually, if you look them up, there's other meetings. They've been to city council before. They go to other cities, and they're like comedians, I guess, and they're just in character going to, council meetings and board meetings. But they're speaking technically, on things within the jurisdiction of the city. So, yeah, that's a fun one. Just.
We hit the big time when the bros show up to the
Yeah, I really hope they do come to our board meeting.
So if you're watching,
I will request that our budget be tight.
fire.
Yeah.
It is fire.
Yeah, it needs to be fire.
So that's it.
That is
All right, thanks, Kyla.
amazing.
All right, we're on to the review and approval of updated investment policy.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Let
This is gonna be
It's kind of a downer,
That's a really bad setup for Nicole.
I'm
You
sorry.
gotta
Yeah.
put this agenda together.
Well, I had to, remedy the crying. So, I do want to say with the review and approval of updated investment policy. We actually have a resolution, you might have seen the board package, that I was going to note at the adoption of the agenda and did not. I think it's okay because we're not bringing, we're not bringing the resolution to the meeting, it was already in the board package. But I do want to note the date was incorrect, so I did update it on the one that you guys will sign. But just to note, if you guys are going to vote on it, that the date has been updated from the one that was in the board package. That's all I'm doing.
Okay. So in the interest of increasing the bottom line of our budget, this is an updated investment policy. And it says September because I was ready to go in September, but I was over ambitious. BB&K needed a little more time to go over it. So our previous investment policy, you can see, was approved July 27th, 2009. We are supposed to update and review the investment policy every year. I don't know the last time that we did it, but we're doing it now. And I believe we added it to the board calendar to now look at it every June as part of the adoption of the annual budget. So I drafted this with Platinum Consulting Group, and Best and Krieger has reviewed it. It's got updated government code in it if you compare it to the budget, the document from 2009. So there is an additional code, the 5920, that has been added to the new document. And essentially what it does is it gives us more freedom to invest our funds. So the way our current investment policy is worded, we are only allowed to invest our funds in the county treasury pool and nowhere else. So we did pass the resolution that would allow us to fund with LAIF in August. This was supposed to come right after updating our investment policy so that we would have the freedom to move those funds to LAIF, so it's a little bit delayed. But that's essentially what this new investment policy does. It allows us more freedom with the investiture of our funds.
I wonder if we can handle this by getting a motion and a second for approval of it, and then have a discussion period after that.
Sure, yeah, okay, so move to approve the updated investment policy and adopt the resolution with the indicated date change.
I'll second the
Okay,
motion.
so moved and seconded, so prior to a vote, we have some discussion on this.
Yeah, I mean, my question is basically just, is there anything material that is behind the camera out that we should be aware of? Or is it just like, kind of policy updating stuff? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, it is really just policy updating stuff. It does require a little bit more on staff's part, but that's a good thing. It satisfies the government code. It's on page 76, section 11, reporting. It expands the reporting requirements for the investiture of the funds. In our old policy, all it says is that we will report the interest income in my monthly financial reports, which really doesn't give you any information about the fund, how it's performing. All it does is show the revenue.
So we're gonna get a quarterly report on
Yes.
what LAIF is doing?
Yes, yeah, you'll get a lot more information this way.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Should that go in the board calendar too? The quarterly reports, or are you guys are just on that probably?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it necessarily needs to go on the board calendar. It's definitely on my calendar.
Yeah.
But we can add it.
It's up, it doesn't need to be if you're on it, which I'm sure you are.
There is some language though that we should, as a board, really pay attention to, because this, we're kind of ups the ante on our responsibility for this, but on page 74 it says, the Board of Trustees shall be responsible for all transactions undertaken and shall establish a system of controls to regulate the activities of the district director, etc. So we're the ones that, are answerable for this. It does say, Nikki, that this falls under your supervision and so on. So the reason I want to bring this up is that it's got this whole list of things: liquidity, return on investments, prudence. They've got all of these terms and such that we wouldn't be looking at in real time, so I guess, in other words, the board's not gonna be seeing this day to day, and maybe Nikki isn't either. I'm just wondering, do you feel all those things are built in to the instruments that you will use to be sending your money to? Can you give us a little bit about that?
So since we'll be investing the funds with LAIF, I will have access to see what's in the accounts, but I won't have the authority to make any changes or anything of that nature. That will be under Nikki's purview, so she will be able to see on a day-to-day basis how the fund is performing, and she will be the one initiating any transfers or things like that. So she will be seeing it in real time. She doesn't know this, she just learned this right now. So she will be seeing in real time how the fund is performing. And I will still be recording all of the income in my monthly reports, but you will be getting the additional quarterly reports, which will be current. They won't be 2 months behind like my financial reports are.
Okay. Are there other public agencies that are using this same group that it sounds like?
Yes.
So this is a group that understands these issues and wants to make sure that we're a risk-averse institution.
Absolutely.
Okay, because all these little pitfalls, any one of them could be tough to explain unless we're pretty sure that they're not taking risks, they're prudent with liquidities there and all the other stuff. So I'm prepared to.
Put it all in Bitcoin.
Let's go do that.
So risky, I like it.
All right.
Will there be any
One thing that-
brokerage fees or anything like that?
There is a fee. I want to say it's very small. I don't remember. I was in my August report. It's something like 0.2% of
Okay.
whatever we earn.
Okay, very good.
Is there some sort of, this is a dumb question, but does our investment portfolio fall under our audit? Or is
Yes.
there so it's part of our external
Yes.
evaluation? Okay.
Absolutely.
So they're looking at that as well?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Just
that's a
thought
good
so, but,
question.
yeah. Good.
I would just say the one thing, yes, we're risk adverse, but I don't know if folks caught, there's an interesting article in the Times, today's 20th, yesterday, regarding pensions, and specifically the least risk adverse investments historically have been bonds. That's what everybody puts their money into. But this was talking about there's a looming crisis with specifically pension funds because of what's been happening with the bond market, right? So what it means by being risk adverse is probably going to be changing drastically in the near future when it comes to investments. So hopefully LAIF is on top of that one.
Yeah, I saw that article. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Avoid another looming crisis, right?
Yeah.
To look forward to. All right, if there's no more discussion then, are we prepared to vote? So all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you, Nicole. All right, now on to new business, Director Performance Evaluation Process and Informational Part. Do you want to talk about this? Or?
Sure. So Terry and Nikki and I met, and sort of talked through what Nikki sees as her body of work for the first 3 months. And I'm gonna let you talk about that because that was kind of the list that we came up with at the end of that, by the end of that meeting, that we put in writing. Our hope and intent was to have an actual evaluation form. We actually talked about having an evaluation form ready to go this meeting, and we are still in the process of sort of gathering examples to use to draft into something that makes sense for us. And we realized the most important thing was for us all to be clear, all of us on the board and Nikki, sort of what we think her priorities are and what makes sense for her to be concentrating on for the first 3 months. And we will be doing an evaluation, and kind of an interim evaluation at the February meeting, and then again at the May meeting, which are the 3-month and 6-month marks before an annual evaluation would happen in November. So we'll keep working on the form idea, but, Nikki, maybe you'd like to just go through what your priorities are for the first 3 months, and with the idea that if the board has either adjustments they wanna make to that, or additions, or whatever kind of reaction people might have, just so she feels like she's on track.
Yes. And I'm literally just looking at the email that you
Yeah.
sent.
That's
Because Betsy took really good notes at that meeting. One of the, I think, biggest priorities I have right now is once the strategic plan is adopted, we wanna make sure that we're, developing good goals and objectives for this year. Part of that process is going to be meeting with, the management team, which we have our first meeting set up for next week on Wednesday, I believe. And then also talking to the staff so that we're determining these goals and objectives together. Before they are set, I also want to set up meetings with people, members of the public, so that we can talk to them about what our strategic priorities are and be able to incorporate, the ideas and thoughts that the public have. So I would like to see those ready to go sometime in January so that we can use this calendar year to identify those goals and objectives. And then again, this would be a yearly process to review what we want to set out to do. So that's one of the big ones. I also wanted to complete one-on-one meetings with each staff person. As I mentioned earlier, I'm planning to have all of those completed by December 9th is when I think Kyla and I will have those done. And again, with my 8 direct reports, I've, asked what their vision for the district is, what their personal goals and aspirations are. I want to do the same type of thing with all of the staff, so I get a sense of where they see the district heading, as well as how I can help them move forward as employees and my new work family, basically. Another thing related to the strategic plan is I've been talking to Chloe, our marketing director, about revamping the newsletter. I'd really like to reframe it based on the strategic priorities. So, I kind of have a vision of like each page relates to one of those priorities, but also trying to turn it into more of like a deeper dive into what's going on in the community, not just what's happening at the library. Right now, it's very program heavy in terms of like every single thing that we have going on, but her and I want to incorporate some type of like QR coding so that people can use their phone and then really explore programming and filter, based on what it is that they're looking for. But we'd like to do like features on people from the community, some of our partner organizations, or other things going on as they relate to those strategic priorities that we identified. So it'll have a completely new look. I'm excited about that, and we're hoping to probably produce that early in the new year. So that was another one. Currently we have several different teams. One of them is called the programming team. We had a leadership team, so one of my other early on goals is going to revamp what our teams look like. One of them, and I don't know if this is what we'll end up calling it, is doing something like a community engagement team that embraces programming, outreach, staff events, and our dealings with the support groups as like a more cohesive group. I think right now some of the programming that's getting planned is done in silos, and like outreach and programming definitely go hand in hand. So we're gonna look at setting up a different type of structure in terms of our like committee groups, basically. I also wanted to create a weekly update communication tool that I hope all of you are already getting. Chloe put together the template basically in like 2 hours. She's really incredible. So that's something that we're gonna send out every week, basically the last day of the week. So you guys will be updated on what's going on. I'm also, as I mentioned, doing work plans with my direct reports. In, it might not be the first 3 months, but definitely within the first 6, I'd like to have that trickle down so that all of the supervisors in the system are also meeting with their staff on a regular basis as well, so that the communication goes up and down. We're also reactivating what I think is called the Emergency Action Team Committee. We don't have really clear evacuation policy and procedure, so we're gonna put this team together, get that happening, as well as making sure we're doing regular drills in both buildings. My understanding is that that's not something we've been doing, and especially in light of emergencies that have been happening, we wanna make sure that we have a process in place to make sure everybody's accounted for and we all know how to evacuate buildings if we need to. So that's coming soon. Also, plan for participating and assisting with the census collection. So, you know, my 3 months will be February, and we, I think, need to have a very clear plan as to how we're gonna tackle that starting in March. Also, attendance at a human resources training conference in November, check, that one's done. And I'll also be learning and participating in the budgeting process, especially as it relates to mid-year budget, working closely with Nicole. Today she taught me how to do payroll, so I'm a little bit of a backup for her in the event that that pops up. But I also am gonna spend a lot of time with her really comprehensively learning all about the budget and everything related to it. So those are my first 3 months goals.
The way this came about with Betsy and I meeting with Nikki was Betsy's email to me that said, you know, we really should be thinking about the way that we structure our relationship with Nikki and get out of the starting gate on the right foot on this so that we don't wind up in, you know, the situation like last time. And I think it's a great idea. So we picked up the work here as sort of a, you know, the residual, you know, search committee activities. And I think one of the things we also came up with was the idea that we would meet with you in 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is to get that first interview or first sort of review done. Your contract calls for annual reviews, so make sure that we're in that rhythm afterwards. But just want to get an early start. And I don't know, you know, how a board does the reviews of the director, to tell you the truth, but I know whoever the president is, you know, at the 6-month mark, when we've sort of pledged to get together again and talk about your first 6-month goals, that we would need to, you know, get together and discuss that as a group. That's my vision of how this should go.
As far as the actual format of that process, Nikki contacted her colleagues in other library districts and also Glendale, I think, to just kind of start to gather just the format that people use to go through that process, and has offered to do kind of a first draft of that, and we can work together to make sure it ends up to be a document that's workable for us. So we would definitely want that in place by February.
So I remember when we talked about this, when we were doing the board policies, one of the things that I think BBK said was, because I think we've got it built in, I didn't go back and check, but I think we've got it built in that in the first year, there's a 3-month, a 6-month, and a formal. And the idea was that that is sort of the perfect use of a closed session, personnel conversation, right? That at 3 and 6 months, we can have, as a board, a closed session, kind of informal conversation before a more formal evaluation. Is that, am I tracking on
Yes.
this? Okay, perfect. Great.
Just one quick comment, because it's kind of exciting to hear about revamping the newsletter, because it's really critical information, but I think that part of our outreach, like when you do something new, it always gets attention. I would just suggest, and I know even Mark Mariscal from our friends has brought this up, the local group is building a Better Altadena on this huge push to try and, they want to do a full newspaper for the community. I don't know where that's at, but if we're moving in a slightly different direction, it just might make sense to have a conversation with them. If nothing else, it's going to get us connected on some of that work. But it's also just making sure we're not duplicating.
Yeah, I mean, I can
limited
tell you
resources,
where
but-
BBK is. I was having conversations with Karen Gibson and Joan and Birch, kind of leading the push on this. I think they had a series of kind of feasibility meetings earlier this year. Terry, I know you were at one of them, about basically everybody saying, boy, it'd be great if we had something. And I think sort of their takeaway was, kind of turns to whoever is there on behalf of the library and says, I think the library should do that. I think the library should build our website, do a newspaper, make a podcast, like fill in the blank, whatever it is. So I think this is a really good first step, and I think as part of our like list of community meetings that happen, NEDA is a good one, just to kind of get a feel from them. I think they are very invested in there are certain people in the organization very invested in the idea of a traditional newspaper, but I think that they're more invested in the idea of getting some kind of cohesive communication strategy to happen, and so yeah. That's a lot of stuff.
So,
It's not what we told Katie she was gonna do. I mean, we told Nikki what she was gonna do. She told us what she was gonna do, and I just wrote it all down.
That seems fine with me.
so we are going to come up with a document, right, kind of first pass, and then get this in front of the board for approval. Maybe the next meeting? Maybe January?
Well, yeah, we'll see.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll work on it.
I mean, all the other things you guys work on, I'm sorry to pile on with this, but it's good to get this infrastructure established, I think.
For sure.
All right, any more comment on that? So,
Thank you guys for jumping on that. It's really important.
okay, I'll ask again, because we're 2.5 hours into this. I don't know how long the next item is gonna take.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. You wanna,
Okay.
Push on through.
let's push on through then, okay, we can do that. So, that would be the Pasadena Unified School District Franklin Elementary School discussion.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to be as concise as I can. So this is, something that we talked a little bit about last time, and I wanted to just fill you guys in on kind of where this is. It's been taking up a fair amount of bandwidth for me, and I'll just hold it. Then I can sit.
Where is Franklin?
Who wants to relax?
It's Ventura, just west of Focus.
Okay, that is better. Okay, so here's, sorry, I can't, it's too complicated. So here's the deal. So basically the backstory on all this that you guys need to know and kind of why I think it impacts us and why it's relevant for us to talk about is, so obviously our service area overlaps with Pasadena Unified, and we have, in the past decade, well, the past several decades, seen the number of public schools in Altadena declining consistently over time. And Pasadena Unified, like most school districts all across the country, is facing difficult challenges. They have declining enrollment, they have, a falling birth rate, they have rising property prices that are driving people, especially people with young children, into less expensive places. So there are fewer kids around. But Pasadena Unified is unique in that it has one of the most extreme versions of this problem because of the prevalence of charter schools and private schools, which are really the legacy of desegregation, or in our case, failed desegregation. So, as you guys probably know, PUSD is the only school district outside the Deep South that underwent federally mandated integration in the 70s because its record on racial segregation was so poor. There was huge resistance to that in the moment, and there continued to be huge resistance over time. And I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but the fact is that 45% of kids in PUSD who are eligible to attend a neighborhood public school don't. So that is a really, really, really extreme number.
That's a really high number.
It's super high, yeah, and it has gone up. It has gone up. And what has been happening over time is, PUSD closes a school, that school gets leased to a charter school, and sort of neighborhood public school becomes a very different entity. And it's a much bigger conversation, of course, about how charters work and how they interact with our public school system and da-da-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, I think the reason that this has something to do with us is because we're an organization that cares about public education and public accessibility and equity of resources. So all of this is a very long prelude to the fact that I'm going to try to get the dates right on this.
like December, January of this past year, so early 2019, PUSD looked at their numbers and they said, well, we're gonna have to do something because we have too many, like we have not the numbers to sustain the number of elementary schools and middle schools and high schools that we have. And so they had a subcommittee to look at it. That subcommittee included Pat Cahalan, Kim Kenny, who is, you know, part of our district for Altadena. She's our PUSD rep. And they made a recommendation that included closing Jefferson and redistributing those kids to certain schools, and they said that'll pretty much solve the problem. And the board, there was a 3-person subcommittee and a 4-person majority on the board, none of whom were on the subcommittee totally rejected that proposal, and they said we're not going to do that at all. We're going to do something totally different. And I'm not going to try to get into the politics of the PUSD board and why it works the way it does, but the result was that Roosevelt, which is an elementary school that caters to particularly children with disabilities and special needs kids, as well as Franklin, which is historically an elementary school attended by communities of color and has a larger component of Black and brown kids than other elementary schools, both got closed. And there was a strong protest from the subcommittee, and they said, we don't think this is the right way to do it. We don't think this is going to be effective. We don't think it's going to result in a better outcome. But that was the decision that was made at the September 27th board meeting. There were also a lot of attendant things about like not making it public before summer vacation so that parents didn't really know that this was in the offing, but not allowing enrollment at the schools that had already been identified by district staff for closure. So as a result, like numbers were down at Franklin, and you can turn around and say, well, nobody's enrolling, but it was because enrollment wasn't open because it had already been targeted, right? So there are lots and lots and lots of governance problems with this, none of which are our purview, but what is our purview is that, as you guys know, Franklin is our next door neighbor. So as a neighboring sort of public institution right behind the Bob Lucas Library, there's a natural relationship between those two, and it's one that's existed for a long time. So I was sort of involved in some of these conversations, and what came out of a lot of them was the feeling that, one, closing Franklin is the wrong call. It doesn't solve PUSD's problems. Two, it continues to target a population that has traditionally been treated very badly by PUSD and underserved by a lot of other public institutions. I think I could say our own included at various points, although I think we're making a real effort to redress that. And three, that there is the potential to do something really interesting with Franklin, and this is where sort of the so what are we going to do about it phase comes in. So in talking with Marian Stewart, who's the principal at Franklin, she said, well, listen, I don't know if the board would even consider it, but there are people in the community who've expressed interest in basically ponying up the money that it would cost to keep Franklin open. So I've been talking to them, and there are private donors, who, many of whom were actually involved in trying to keep Cleveland opened, but were unable to do so, who are interested in putting up some money. And so the thought is, what if there's an opportunity to do something that marries community support with potentially some support from us as a library, potentially some support from PCC, and works with this idea of creating something along the lines of a community school, right? So it's something where you've got your 160 kids that are enrolled at Franklin now. You have co-programming from other organizations like us. You have adult education and continuing ed services from PCC, kind of like they do at Muir. And it becomes a magnet for public education and public services in a community, in a really different model, right? And so the idea is that you would take that private money and use it to sustain the first year so that you can write a bunch of grants, basically, to prove the viability of this over a 3 to 5 year period. There are a bunch of grants available for community school models. It was a major focus of Obama-era Department of Education policy. Presently, of course, the Department of Education is not particularly interested in community schools, but there's still a lot of private organizations and public partnerships that are interested in it. And studies kind of generally show that for every $1 you invest in a community school, you end up with $15 on the back end in local economic growth and viability. So it tends to be a very well means-tested, like proven model of doing something interesting. So where this all is I think it's something that we should at least be in the conversation about. I don't know if there's any potential for getting the PUSD board to care about this, be interested in this, be open to a conversation about it. But I would say that there's a lot of merit in trying. To that end, there's a meeting on Sunday, December 1st. Terry, Nikki, I've looped you guys in on that email chain, and I would have done it with the rest of you guys as well, but
You hadn't
Brown
established
Act.
a date, but-
Hadn't established a date, yeah, so that happened today, so,
Where is it?
so I gotta find a place, but it's Sunday, December 1st, so like at the tag end of the Thanksgiving holiday, so Sunday, December 1st, from 4 to 5 p.m. And I'm trying to get as many sort of different community constituencies there as I can. So some folks from NBBA, some folks from town council, some folks from the neighborhood, some folks from Franklin, some parents, some teachers, to talk about this and see what we want to do going forward. The money is on the table, so the donors in question have basically said, like, yeah, we're down to do it. We feel pretty confident that we can come up with the $350K that we've established as sort of a baseline number to pitch. And the reality of this is, at the end of the day, from the board perspective at PUSD, I think it has zero to do with the dollar. Like, I don't think it's a bottom line dollar issue at all. I think it's, they've made a decision, they want to move on, they feel like they've dealt with it, it's over, what are you going to do? But I think it's important as a community to say, actually, we're not fine with it, actually, we weren't consulted, actually, we do have a viable alternative, what do you think about that? So that's kind of where it is. I wanted to loop you guys in so you knew what was going on. I am doing all this not as a representative of the library. I'm not trying to claim that I speak for the board or for the district or anything, but I do think that there's an important opportunity here. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that there's a real fighting chance to keep Franklin open, but I think the second line defense is keeping that space public. Because what will happen the minute that that campus is closed at the end of the school year is they're gonna lease it to a charter school, and it's gonna go from being a public education space to something that is not. And I think that we have a vested interest in keeping a public space for education open next door to Bob Lucas. And I think West Altadena, nobody in West Altadena is saying we don't want an elementary school, So, yeah, that's kind of where it is, and that's 10 minutes, and I did pretty good.
And I will just add that there were numerous comments at the facilities town hall of Bob Lucas asking that we look in, because the question of space comes up at Bob Lucas, right? And the reality is we're not in a position right now to try and figure out how do we come up with millions of dollars to build a new library on the west side. So the idea of partnering with Franklin, whose library space has been shuttered for who knows how long, it did come up. So it is something that the community is engaged with. It's an idea that the community is engaged with as far as, if nothing else, how do we as a library find a creative solution to our space issues?
And Franklin is an elementary school that was built for 500 kids, and its enrollment currently hovers around somewhere between 150 to 180. And part of that is because for this year enrollment was locked off. Part of it is because there's been, and this will shock everyone to hear, an inequity of distribution of resources. So other schools are getting like magnet programs and French immersion programs, and Franklin's getting nothing. They recently got this coding program, which actually did drive enrollment, but there wasn't actually time to see if it was going to be successful or not. So I think, having presence from us is not just a benefit for us as a library, because there's space for creative and performing arts. They have this crazy awesome auditorium. They've got classroom space, which we desperately need. they've got library space. Like, there are a lot of upsides for us, but there are also a lot of upsides for Franklin, because if this is someplace that people are going and families are engaged and resources are available, that drives enrollment for them as well. So it's, you know, it's not just us going like, are you gonna eat that, are you gonna use that classroom? But it's us thinking about how we can be a really, you know, viable partner.
How are the parents engaged in this? And have they been, you know, attending some of these meetings?
Yeah, they have. So the parents, the teachers are uniformly pretty heartbroken. And not only is there just sort of sadness and confusion and a feeling that, you know, they weren't involved in the process, they weren't informed, they just were kind of blindsided by this. But there's a lot of concern that all these kids who are at Franklin are supposed to be shipped to Altadena Elementary. And there's a lot of confusion right now because some of the parents are hearing that there's not actually room for them at Altadena Elementary, so like where are they supposed to go? So I think a lot of it is bad communication, bad outreach, bad engagement. Like, there are a lot of like kind of higher level problems, and a deeply dysfunctional board at PUSD that is, again, I'm very happy, not our problem, but I think that we are kind of ending up with sort of the results of a lot of that. So yeah, I mean, there's a ton of engagement with parents and teachers, but also I will say that, and this is what Dr. Stewart has said to me, is that like a lot of the parents who are at Franklin are folks who are, you know, working jobs. They don't have the kind of disposable time and income that maybe some other groups of parents might have. And so as a result, you know, they're an easy target. So, that being said, I would say I will BCC everybody on the location for this meeting on Sunday. I don't want to violate the Brown Act, but since it's not a library thing, I think it's totally cool. And pending the result of that, I think having some kind of action item on our December agenda might be pretty legit.
All right, thank you, Katie. I do appreciate the fact that you disassociated the board, the library, from what you're doing. And I think it would be good for you to keep that up for as long as we're not making resolutions and stuff like that. And so on the 1st, it sounds like, is that meeting set now?
Yeah.
Okay, there's gonna be a lot of information that's gonna surface there, I would think.
Yeah, I think it'll be a chance for everybody to kind of say, what do we want to do, right? Like, given that these are the sort of, this is the situation on the ground, what do we want to do? Because there's a PUSD board meeting on December 12th, and then they're kind of on a break until mid-January. And what will invariably happen is, if no action is taken on the community front, then the board will say, well, it's too late, we've already, you know, passed this resolution and kind of time has gone on, so you missed your moment, and like, there's nothing.
Where, does that, Del Mar, they have that meeting on the 12th? I don't know where the school board convenes.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, that sounds
Oh,
interesting.
yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
What did he say?
Del Mar and Hudson. Where's the board meeting?
Yes.
And I think Jennifer Lee from Town Council, I have to verify this with her, but she may already have a spot on the agenda for that meeting to talk about Franklin and kind of what the community response is. If not, I know somebody else is working on getting a spot on that agenda, so that's sort of, that's before our meeting, but.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one to tune in on. All right, thank you for that. All right, review and approval of holidays and closures for 2020.
Looks good to me.
So
I didn't
it's
write 'em
pretty
down, huh?
predictable. The one thing, there's actually two things. So Columbus/Indigenous Peoples Day, we're putting that in there as a placeholder, as basically a staff development day. I think I've mentioned to a couple of the trustees that I would like to pursue trying to send the entire district staff to CLA next year, because it's again gonna be in Pasadena. So this could potentially change. but we wanna leave it on there as a placeholder. It could potentially move to being a different Friday, or a Friday in October, so FYI. The other thing is, we'd like to amend this to remove closing at 5 on Thanksgiving Eve. Basically what we're dealing with this week is it complicates people's schedules, cause they either have to take leave or they, have to come in an hour early. Plus, the library closes an hour early, so we're only open till 6 on Wednesdays, so we as a administrative team talked about it.
Can I add, and then Bob Lucas typically is open until 8 on Wednesdays,
Yeah.
so they're more active.
Yeah, so we'd like to just remove that and leave the schedule the way it is on a normal Wednesday.
What is it at 5 or what is the timing?
Well, we're open till 6,
Oh, so you wanna
and the
leave it
branch is
to
open till 8, so, I mean, maybe that's something we could talk about later, but.
So we would just remove that from the early closure?
Yeah, just remove it.
Any more discussion?
So the branch is open until 8?
On Wednesday and Thursday.
So I would like to see them go home early myself, just as anybody else. If you're gonna close at 5, close
We could make it a
them
district-
both at 5.
District closure at 6 on that Wednesday. That makes the schedules, right, and then, yeah, then the staff would just work 9 to 6, and then they could shift to that. It's just a lot of staff, like this week, are impacted. I would have already made this change, but it came to my attention today. So maybe we'll amend it to say that we'll close at 6, so both branches would close at 6. Does that work?
Yep.
Yeah, 5 or 6.
Right, can I get a motion then to approve this with the changes that have been discussed?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, I think. Somebody second that? Okay.
I did.
All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And the last item is the trustees' calendar.
So that is pretty straightforward. I did wanna ask though about December, because it is, the third Monday is so late, but, you know, there are other holidays in December, so, you know, it could be on the second Monday, it just makes it, you know, so much sooner. And we only have a couple weeks from the November, to the December meeting, but if you guys are okay with meeting on the 21st, then.
Well, it'll be about the same spread as what we're having right now, right?
Right, but it's just, like, so like this month, or next month is on the 16th. And then if we keep it on that third Monday, next year it would fall on the 21st. If we decided to move it up, it would be on the 14th. But I just,
So there would still be 3 weeks then between November and December, right?
Yes.
So this one caught my eye too, because, you know, not that I personally have a lot of shindigs going on right before Christmas, but I know a lot of people do. And so sometimes having a December meeting a little earlier in the month works for people's personal schedules.
Yeah,
so it would be-
I feel like that week of Christmas is gonna be pretty brutal.
The week of Christmas.
Personally. I mean, I know we always meet on a Monday, is there any reason to give it a couple more days? Cause like, I get that the 14th is early, cause I was like, you gotta have your stuff in by the 9th, which is like a day after our last meeting. Is there any reason we couldn't do like maybe the 17th or the 18th, like the end of that last full week? I know it's not a Monday, but.
I don't see I'm not tied to a Monday.
It seems like we're already an outlier just with next month's meeting, and we're kind of gone off the schedule, so it doesn't seem, I mean, is there some charter document somewhere that says we always have to meet on that Monday at that time?
No, it's just, I think the board policy, and we have moved it for May and December because typically we're closed on that fourth Monday. But as long as you guys have a meeting covered.
We're voting to approve it, so.
Yeah, it just, it
If
says
we're voting
in,
to approve it as a change for a specific reason,
Yeah.
it should be fine.
if we set it as a regular meeting, it's a regular meeting.
So
Like,
the 17th then is the date you're.
I was just thinking about, I don't know if that's probably town council or whatever, but, yeah, that Thursday the 17th,
I know Friday's not great,
Okay, yeah.
but.
Terry pointed out that it's still 3 weeks between the sixth, between, wait, one,
The
2, 3,
23rd.
between the because of the fact that there's a Monday on November 30th, that still would give us 3 weeks between the November meeting and the December meeting, just like it's gonna be this year. I don't think it's a good idea to change the day of the week. I mean, our public, these things on Mondays.
We might find out that Thursday draws them in.
Well,
And you had a reason, Dave, I don't think I got it, something about turning things in by the 9th.
Oh, well, because so I get that it is still 3 weeks, but like, basically,
You lose 3 days functionally for Thanksgiving. And so if we moved it to a Thursday, that would mean like you could get the board packet finalized by Monday and out Tuesday, 72 hours in advance, right? Rather than like a week and a half. I don't know. I mean, I don't put the board packet.
let's talk to the people who put the board packet out.
Yeah, what do you
I
think?
mean, I think for us, it's. So we have the board meeting on the 23rd, the only thing is like board reports, so the month ends on that Monday the 30th. And then, you know, I would basically be giving staff like a week, you know, to do their board reports and get them in so we can get the board package done by the end of that week.
About the 17th.
I mean, we've done it before.
So you're saying a week is enough time for you?
I think so. I mean, if we give them, I mean, they're gonna know, they're gonna have a heads up. If we give everyone a heads up in November and say just a reminder, just like we will this time, you know, letting them know the board meeting's earlier. I mean, it happens in May too. It's not as short of a time frame, but, you know, I think we'll be okay.
I don't feel strongly about it either way. I would say not the 21st, but other than that, what?
Yeah, I agree, not the 21st. It does, honestly, now that I say it, feel a little ridiculous to worry about throwing the public off. So I would go with what staff, I mean, it seems like it's mostly the staff burden.
I don't have a preference. I mean, I didn't suggest the 14th also because I think it falls on Hanukkah, so I didn't know, you know, if there were other.
Well, that's interesting.
When is
Hanukkah?
What-
It's very early.
See, because Hanukkah's 8 nights, so it only matters as if it's the last one.
Oh, okay.
And I can figure that out, give me a sec.
Well, I'm okay with keeping it on a Monday, if we can we at least standardize that part of it.
Hanukkah dates in 2020. Starts Thursday, December 10th, ends Friday, December 18th.
Oh, okay. So the 17th is still
It-
very hard. So I think the 14th is probably better because if we have it on a Thursday night, we are keeping the library open later and I think the 14th is.
And then while we're on the subject, has anybody ever thought about, let me ask the question to the board. Are you guys okay with a 5 o'clock start time, or let's see, is 5:30 ever been discussed as a start time for the meeting? To have people get here a little bit more breathing time?
Now, I probably am going to speak to this because I usually take off in December, and that second week, if it's the 14th, I won't be able to attend the meeting. So you already know, most of you already know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as long as I've given you warning.
Well, and so that question then would be, is there a start time at 5:30, give everybody a little bit more breathing room to get here and so on? Is that worth discussing, or just leave that alone?
Personally, I like 5 o'clock. I'll go to 5:30 if it makes other people's lives easier, because I know school day schedule is easier as far as work hours, but, you know, the later we start, the later.
Yeah, and it does run late, so I mean, 5's okay with me, I just wanted to bring it up and make
I
sure.
mean, I used to think that like our 5 o'clock meeting start time was problematic because if people work a full-time job, they can't, and they have kids, you know what I mean? Like they couldn't realistically like get here for the beginning of the meeting. But given the way we're kind of handling outreach anymore, I'm not that worried about it because I see us doing our community-facing meetings like town halls and things like that at like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, at like normal people times where there's actually a time. So for regular meetings, I mean, I'd rather be out of here before 10
Yeah,
o'clock.
okay, I just
So-
wanted to bring it up.
No, it's a good question.
Well, especially since the change we made to have, when we do need to have closed session, to have at the top, I think that was maybe your
Right.
suggestion, Katie, I think that's been a
That's
good
helpful.
change.
That's been good.
Okay, good. So, can I get a motion then to approve the calendar with the December 14th date? That meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve it with that change. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
So the next is adjournment, right?
Before we adjourn, I forgot two things, can I say two things?
Sure.
I wanted to make sure y'all, I think everybody gets this magazine. Do you get this magazine? There's the November issue of Altadena Neighbors features an article about
Oh,
Bob
no,
Lucas.
no, no, Betsy, this is a can of worms.
It is?
Oh, yeah.
The Bob Lucas family?
Not
I
even
know.
for me, I don't know what it is.
That's a targeted publication.
So Altadena Neighbors is a targeted real estate publication. And it only goes to people in a certain socioeconomic bracket on
Well,
most of the east
congratulations,
side of
Betsy.
town. No.
Clearly, I haven't made it there yet.
But it has a wonderful.
So the wild thing about it, so this issue it features the Bob Lucas family.
Lucas
There's a thing about the hidden history program that we
that
did.
features the Bob
And
Lucas.
there was like kind of a lot of drama because they originally reached out and said, we want to use like a bunch of photos that you guys took and we want information about what happened, and like I'm misquoted in there and some of the facts are incorrect.
Oh my gosh.
And so the organizing committee and I wrote back and said, listen, we'd love to help you, but we have a problem with sort of the inherent exclusivity of what you do. And it kind of it doesn't go to the very people whose stories we're trying to highlight, and so that's sort of problematic. And they got very bent out of shape with us, and so there it is.
And but they ran it anyway.
Oh, yeah,
They-
yeah, they did.
And this is an excellent picture here of the Bob Lucas Library, where it was a different board at that time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Is this the group that does the like things at like Cafe de Leche and stuff? Is it the same
No,
group?
it's a different group. So this is a real estate marketing.
Yes, it is
And
real estate.
basically,
I
Altadena
noticed
Neighbors is produced by this real estate marketing concern that works in a couple of different communities, like they're in Sierra Madre, they're in other places. And they contract with some like local Altadena folks. So like the histories article is by Elliot Gold, who does Acona. Deb Halberstadt, who you guys might know, does some of the photography. Mostly people do it for free, which is
But
cool
there's
and
the
fine.
magazine there that
But
they
it's
made.
run for profit, and it's run to basically run real estate ads. And so they're in one of, I will say this on the record, as one of their comments, they said, you know, we basically kind of are taking it sort of personally that you're saying all these things because we are now distributing as far west as Lincoln. And I said, well, you know, don't pull a muscle.
You're trying to sell houses for $1 million.
Yeah, well, that's it, and Lincoln's gentrifying, West Altoona is gentrifying. So, yeah, so it's sort of a wild thing because it only goes to a very specific subset of the community, which is sort of interesting.
I
and
didn't
awesome.
know that.
So do you think it's a bad article?
I think it's
do
an
you think
inaccurate
it's a misinforming
article.
article?
I don't think it's misinforming necessarily, but I think that they are using the Bob Lucas family and they're using the event that we did to try to present themselves as inclusive and socially interested in the way that they are fundamentally not.
Usually
saw
it's
that
all
because
white.
we got delivered one by accident. It was supposed to go to one of the neighbors, and I was like, what is this? And I like passed it off to Chloe, and yeah.
And there's a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction coming out of West Altoona about this because, you know, it's
I don't wanna use the term whitewashing, but it's basically, you know,
Usually
it's
it's all
using a
white.
socially conscious and interested event that tried really hard to represent people who were traditionally unrepresented to market to people that are traditionally not, that are, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's super problematic, so,
Well, it
Well,
brings,
yeah.
it brings stuff out into the public consciousness, which
Yeah.
is where it belongs.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's.
So I mean, am I glad that people found out about it? Like, am I opposed to the fact that, like, what we did was featured? And I think that's awesome. I just wish that they had been a little bit more interested in working with us in some kind of meaningful way.
We also need to be clear about what they are and what they're doing, because I
Right.
think most people are gonna get that, and they're gonna assume it's some kind of legitimate community-based publication, right?
Well, I mean, I get stuff like this all the time that I know is just an advertisement vehicle, that's what it is, especially if it's free, it's not, you know, nothing's actually free. But I honestly didn't know it was targeted, that's so interesting. Okay, well, that was the first thing I wanted to
Sorry,
say.
I didn't
No,
mean to,
no,
like-
no, I'm so interested that you,
Got a hammer on
that you
that.
illuminated that. On a more positive note, I hope, I just want you all to know that my band is playing in this room 2 weeks from tonight at 7 o'clock. Zed's Klezmer Ensemble. Uni had the idea to invite us to play, kind of as a little balance to the whole Christmas tree laying thing. It's not a Hanukkah concert at all, we do have one Hanukkah song we're gonna play, but it's really, really fun music, so I hope you all come.
I'm here.
I'm going to make this last comment. Thank you, Betsy, for the article regarding accessibility issues. That was really very, very good. So thank you so much for sending that to us.
Yeah,
that
no,
was-
sorry, I totally forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I particularly liked it because it talked about accessibility for everyone. Whether it's a mother who's got a baby in a stroller, doesn't matter about age, doesn't matter about size, all of those kinds of things. And so, thank you.
Can I just say, I sent it to Jonathan too, and he immediately responded and was so gratified to feel like our process is gonna avoid all those problems that they had.
Yeah.
And Jason too. It's a good thing we have a good team.
Yeah, so we just need to make sure we be inclusive.
Right, any more closing comments? I realize I rushed past correspondence, in which we have none, unless we're going to enter something.
For number 9, though, I just want to make sure I have the seismic and historical presentation item, strategic plan, Franklin, and then we talked about the demographer, but maybe it sounded like the committee might meet, and then, okay. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Good, so we have none.
Can I just, anything else? Can I thank the board and the library for the plaque that they gave us to celebrate our 60th? I completely forgot to mention it. It will be up in the bookstore very soon, and we appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. All right, with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that.
Second it.
Second, okay, move second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.